I used to believe the wilderness was honest. When I parked my 1978 Volkswagen Westphalia under the blood orange sky of Utah's Zion National Park, I told myself the land couldn't lie. Trees didn't wear masks. The wind didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Nature could be brutal, yes, indifferent even, but it never tried to deceive you. Not like people did. I believed that until that trip. Until something or someone vanished in the wilderness without a trace. And until I came face to face with the parts of myself I didn't want to see. It was early September, the sort of fall that burns quietly before the chill sharpens the air. I'd been solo vanning for years by then, ever since I left the noise of my old life behind. The meetings, the apartment clutter, the suffocating 9-to-5. The road had become my only compass. There was something healing in that unpredictability, or at least that's what I told myself when I couldn't sleep at night. I'd been staying off-grid outside Zion for 3 nights when I met Cole and April. They were young, early 20s at most, bright-eyed, full of the kind of trust I'd already shed like a snakeskin. Cole had the casual charm of someone who didn't know yet how rare kindness could be in the wild. April was quieter, alert, with those wide, scanning eyes that missed nothing. They were camped just 100 yards down from me, in a rust-colored Sprinter van, with a solar rack bolted to the roof. I'd seen them hiking earlier that week, crossing the dried riverbed barefoot, laughing like people who had no reason to be afraid. We met at dusk on the 3rd night. I'd been boiling water on my propane stove when I heard footsteps approach, slow, deliberate, crunching through the brittle sagebrush. Cole stepped into the fading light first, and just a grin on his face, holding a beat-up steel mug. "Hey man," he said, "sorry to bug you. We ran out of gas for our stove and April wanted tea. You wouldn't happen to have any hot water?" It was a small thing, just hot water. But something about the way he asked, too casual, too trusting, made me pause. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I remembered being that naive once too. I remembered the cost. Still I nodded. Sure, almost done boiling. April stayed behind Cole, arms folded, eyes flicking toward the trees more than me. I liked her instincts. That night we shared drinks and stories under a sky so black it felt like the stars were listening. They told me they were road tripping across the country, filming content for a travel vlog that hadn't quite taken off. Cole did most of the talking. April mostly watched. She asked a few sharp questions that stuck with me. Why do you camp alone? Doesn't it ever feel too quiet? I didn't have a good answer for that. The next morning, their van was gone. No note, no tire tracks, just gone. Now, in the desert, the ground's too hard-packed for clear tread patterns, but it still unsettled me. I walked down to their camp spot just after sunrise, thinking maybe they'd left early to hike the Narrows, or maybe they'd had an emergency. But everything was wrong. Their camp chair was still there, folded and leaning against a rock. A half-burnt log was still in the fire ring. A spoon was on the ground near an open can of peaches, now swarmed with ants. But the van? Gone, without a sound. And April's shoes, the hiking ones with the neon laces, were still under the folding table. Nobody leaves like that. I told myself maybe they packed up in a hurry, maybe they'd be back. Maybe I was overthinking. But the longer the day stretched on, the heavier the silence felt. Not peaceful like it used to, but dense, compressed, like the land was holding something in its mouth and refused to spit it out. That night, something woke me. It was the sound of knocking, slow, deliberate on the side panel of my van. Not wind, not animal. Knock, knock, knock. 3 times. A pause. Then silence. I sat bolt upright in my sleeping bag, heart lurching up into my throat. My van has no windows in the back, just thick curtains drawn tight. I didn't breathe for a full minute. Knock, knock, 2 more. This time closer to the driver's side. Then footsteps. Soft. Brushing against the gravel like someone barefoot. I reached for my flashlight, but my hand was trembling. Another knock, softer now, like hesitation. Then silence. I waited until sunrise before opening the door. My breath was fog on the glass, even though it hadn't been that cold. There were no tracks, no signs, no van, Nothing. But under the driver's side window, drawn into the condensation on the metal, was a word. Help. I didn't call the Rangers right away. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who mistakes the wind or a raccoon for some cosmic signal. But by midday, when the sun felt too hot for the season and the insects had gone completely still, I felt something shift in the air. It was the smell, actually, that did it. Faint at first, but wrong. Have you ever smelled something off in the wild? Not rot. Not fire. Just wrong, like metal and wet dirt and something that should never be uncovered. I found it coming from the narrow arroyo behind where Cole and April's van had been. It led into a slot canyon, barely wide enough to squeeze through. Most hikers avoid those. Flash floods can turn them into coffins. But something pulled me forward. Not curiosity. Not heroism. Just that sick, tightening feeling in your gut when you know something is very, very wrong. The smell got worse the deeper I went. Thick, sweet, clotted, but I never found a body. What I found was a tarp, folded, clean, set neatly against the sandstone wall like someone had stored it for later use. And under that tarp, a notebook. It was April's. Her name was scratched into the inside cover in tiny, anxious letters. I sat down right there in the canyon to read it. Sunlight filtered in only in strips, like prison bars. She wrote about being followed, about waking up to the sound of whistling just outside their van. She wrote that Cole didn't believe her, that he told her it was just coyotes, that she needed to relax, that the desert played tricks on your ears. She didn't believe him. On the last page, dated 2 days before they disappeared, she'd scribbled a single sentence over and over. It's not the land, it's what's under it. I held that notebook in my hands like it might crumble under the weight of what it had seen. The canyon was silent, but not dead. There was a pulse beneath the rock. I swear I felt it. Like the earth had a heartbeat, slow and deliberate, echoing through the soles of my boots. And I was kneeling on its chest. It's not the land, it's what's under it. April wrote that over a dozen times. Her handwriting deteriorated with each repetition. The last version was nearly illegible, like lines shaking, ink smudged by sweat or maybe tears. She was terrified, and she knew something, or felt something. I looked around, half expecting to see her standing at the canyon mouth, but there was no one, only stone. And that smell, faint now, like it had retreated back into the cracks it came from. I packed the notebook and tarp into my backpack and left the canyon. I didn't run. It was a strange thing, really. My body wanted to sprint to get out of there fast, but I knew that panic would only draw attention. Whose? I didn't know, but I felt watched, like whatever was under the land didn't want to be seen, and it didn't like that I'd found even a piece of it. Back at my van, I locked the doors for the first time in months, pulled the curtains. I sat in the driver's seat, hands clenched on the wheel, the keys dangling but unmoved. I should have left right then. Should have driven down the washboard road to the nearest ranger station, handed over April's notebook, told them everything. But fear does strange things to you. It makes you second-guess what you know, what you felt. It burrows into the soft parts of your memory and distorts them like heat shimmer on pavement. I slept that night in a half-dream. Heard whispers through the van walls, not voices exactly, more like mimicry, like something trying to remember what voices sounded like. Low, croaking, halting, a woman's tone but too flat, like an echo that forgot how to come back. At 2:41 a.m., my van shook, not violently, just once. A single thud, like something had landed on the roof and then rolled off. I didn't move. I just lay there, heart racing, sweat sticking to my back despite the chill. And in the silence that followed, I realized something was missing. The crickets. They'd been constant since I arrived, the background hum of the desert night. But now, nothing. Not a chirp, not a rustle. The air felt vacuumed. I left before dawn, didn't cook breakfast, didn't make coffee. I just threw everything into the cabinets, started the engine, and didn't stop until I hit pavement. But even 40 miles out, the feeling followed me. Not like paranoia, not exactly. More like gravity, like something was pulling me back towards Zion, whether I wanted it to or not. I made it to a ranger station just outside the Kolob Canyon's entrance around 9 a.m. The place was nearly empty. A tired-looking man with a buzz cut and faded name tag, Merrill, was flipping through incident reports at the desk. I handed him the notebook and waited. He didn't even blink. "I've seen this before," he said. "Not the notebook, exactly, but the pattern." "You'd be surprised," he muttered, thumbing through April's entries, "how many people think they hear things out there, see things, lose things, hell, even themselves." "What do you mean lose themselves?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just stared out the window at the line of ridges, the sandstone burning bright in the rising sun. Then, quietly, "There are places in this park system that don't play by the same rules as the rest of the world. Places where stuff sinks. Stuff sinks? Sound, time, people." I asked him what they were doing about it, about the disappearances, about April and Cole. Merrill shrugged. "Officially, we have no reports of a couple missing near Zion this week. No vehicle matches, no alerts, nothing in the system. But I saw them. I talked to them. I found her notebook." "I'm not saying you didn't." He folded his hands. "I'm saying no one filed anything. No family called, no license plate, no record they were ever here." That's when I knew. Something wanted them gone. Not just dead, erased. I left the ranger station with a copy of the report he begrudgingly filed, but I could see it in his face. It was going straight into a drawer, not a database. Back in the van, I pulled over in a rest area off I-15 and just sat there, trying to breathe. That's when I noticed something in the passenger seat. A map. Folded clean. Not mine. It wasn't from any modern park brochure. It was hand-drawn. Faded. The paper yellowed and cracking at the edges, but there was Zion, marked in old ink, Arches, Canyonlands, Bryce, and one place circled in red, Devil's Backbone. I'd never heard of it, not on any trail guide, not on Google Maps, not in forums or backcountry books, but it was close, maybe an hour's drive north, then another 20 on dirt trails. There was a note scribbled beside it in tight cursive, where they go, where they wait. I told myself to burn it, but I didn't, because something in me, something I hate to admit, wanted to know. I wanted answers. Not just about April and Cole, but about myself. About that feeling I couldn't shake, that the road, the wilderness, the van, none of it was as free as I'd believed. There were things beneath the surface, waiting. I turned the key and drove toward Devil's Backbone. The road to Devil's Backbone wasn't on any GPS. I followed the hand-drawn map with my gut more than my eyes, counting turns by memory and scanning the horizon for landmarks the way old hikers do, shadows, ridges, and the way the wind bends trees. The terrain changed as I climbed. The red rock bled into pale limestone. Pines replaced sage. The desert haze gave way to a jagged, almost alpine sharpness. And with each mile, the air got colder. Not crisp, not fresh, sterile, like something had sucked the life out of it. By the time I reached the trailhead, if you could call it that, the sun was low, turning everything gold except the peak itself. The backbone. A knife-edge ridge like a scar across the earth, splitting two valleys wide open. It looked unnatural, like it had been carved deliberately, like a warning. I parked the van beside a cluster of fallen logs, no signs, no markers, no other vehicles, just a narrow path leading toward the ridge. I didn't plan to hike far, I just wanted to see it, to confirm it was real. But I'd barely stepped 50 yards in when I heard something, not loud, not close, just off. It was a whistle, but not playful, not human. A long, rising note, then silence, then again, and again. Same tone, same pitch. Too precise to be random. I stopped. There was no wind, no birds. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed against me, dense and intentional, like a soundproof room in the middle of nowhere. I reached for the map, still folded in my jacket, that red circle around Devil's Backbone the ink had smudged, as if it were still wet. I hadn't touched it since I left the van. The whistle came again, closer. I turned back. But the van, it wasn't there. I froze. It had been right behind me. I hadn't gone far. But now, looking back down the trail, there was nothing. Just trees and dust and silence. No tracks, no lights, no engine hum. It was like the forest swallowed it whole. Panic flickered behind my ribs, tight and hot. I started walking fast, not running, not yet, just fast enough that I could pretend I wasn't afraid. But the trail wasn't the same. Where there had been logs, there was now rock. Where there had been pine needles, now just ash. And that's when I noticed the sky. It wasn't dusk anymore. It was gray, flat, colorless, like someone had turned down the saturation on the whole world. The sun wasn't setting. It was gone. I looked at my watch. 6:47 p.m., but the screen was frozen. No ticking second hand, just stuck. I stood there, holding my breath, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. And then I saw it. In the distance near the crest of the backbone, a shape, small, still, silhouetted against the ridge. I squinted. It looked like a person sitting cross-legged, staring out over the valley. Long hair, slim frame, hands in their lap. April. It had to be. I shouted. No echo. I waved, no movement. I started up the ridge, calling louder, my voice cracking. April. She didn't flinch, didn't turn, just sat like a statue made of shadow. When I reached the top, my legs burning from the climb, she was gone. No footsteps, no indentations in the soft earth, only a small metal object where she'd been sitting. A key, rusty, flat, old, not for a house. It looked like the kind of key used for padlocks, storage. A place meant to be kept closed. I pocketed it without thinking. Then I felt it, a sudden drop in temperature, like a door had opened in the earth and let something out. I turned, and the forest behind me wasn't the same. The trees were wrong, bent backward. Branches curved in unnatural directions, as if blown by a wind that didn't belong to this world. The shadows moved too fast, like they knew I was watching. And then I heard the knocking again. But this time it was underground. 3 knocks, muffled from below. I dropped to one knee, pressed my ear to the soil. Nothing. Then knock, 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 louder, directly beneath me. I scrambled backward, heart hammering, lungs raw. I shouldn't have come. Whatever this place was, it wasn't a trailhead. It was an invitation, and I had accepted it. I bolted down the ridge, branches slashing my arms, stones slipping underfoot. I didn't stop until the forest changed again, brighter, softer, more familiar. And there, thank God, was my van, exactly where I'd left it. I threw open the door, climbed inside, locked every latch. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked hollow, pale. My eyes didn't look like mine. I drove. I don't remember how far. I just kept the wheels turning until the sky came back and the birds started singing and my watch ticked again. I stopped at a KOA campground near Cedar City. Nothing fancy, just lights, people, laughter in the distance, proof I was still in the real world. But that night, parked between 2 families grilling hot dogs, I heard the knock again on the van wall. Just once. Soft. But I knew it wasn't the kids. It wasn't the wind. And when I stepped out, the first thing I saw under the driver's side window was a fresh handprint. Small, delicate, smudged in red Utah dust, and beside it, in faint scratches, you heard it too. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I closed my eyes for a few hours, but my mind kept replaying that knock, soft but deliberate, like a question I wasn't ready to answer. And the handprint, it had heat when I touched it. That was the worst part. It hadn't been there long. At sunrise, I made coffee on the small propane stove and just sat behind the wheel with the van doors locked, watching the campground come to life. Dogs barking, kids on bikes, someone already burning bacon, but none of it touched me. I felt like a ghost in my own story. You heard it too. Whoever wrote that had been here, near me. Maybe even watching as I stumbled through Devil's Backbone. Maybe they'd followed me, or maybe they never left that place. Later that morning, I drove into Cedar City and bought a local hiking map from a dusty little outfitter's store with racks of faded gear and a cashier who looked like he hadn't left the mountain in a decade. I asked him if he'd ever heard of Devil's Backbone. His eyes snapped up so fast it startled me. "You been out there?" he asked. I hesitated. "Just a short hike." He leaned closer over the counter. "You shouldn't go back." "I'm not planning to." He stared at me for a long time, then pulled out a pen and started scribbling on the edge of the map I'd just bought. He drew a crude triangle around an area northwest of Zion, marked 3 X's. "You want to know what's going on?" he said. "You go here. Find these. 3 old trail cabins. Fire watch stations back in the day. They shut them down after the disappearances." "What disappearances?" "All of them." He didn't wait for me to respond, just rang up the map, handed me the change, and said, "Don't stay past sundown." That evening, I found the first cabin. It was nothing more than a rotted square of logs buried in wild overgrowth, half consumed by the woods. But it was real, just like he said. I parked the van at the edge of a makeshift clearing and walked the last 300 yards through tall grass that felt too still, like it was waiting to be brushed the wrong way. The door of the cabin groaned open with a touch. The inside smelled of rust and pine and something chemical, not rot, but something artificial, like battery acid, faint and sharp in the back of the throat. And on the floor, drawn in chalk across the cracked boards, was a circle. Inside it, sticks, a single crow feather, and something that looked like a braid of human hair. It was dry, brittle, the color of ash. I stepped back. My pulse raced. Someone had made this recently. A notebook lay on the hearth, half tucked behind a rusted lantern. I picked it up and opened to the middle. No name. No dates. Just short, sharp entries. We keep hearing it under the floor. The trees are different when we wake up, like they moved. It's not a cave, it's a mouth. I slammed the notebook shut and left. Fast. But the trees, they were different. There was a bend in the trail that hadn't been there before. A stump that was now a stone. I felt like the forest was shifting, reorienting, subtly steering me. Back to the van, I drove out faster than I should have, tires spitting dust like blood from a wound. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station outside Hurricane, and that's where I saw her. Not April, but someone who looked like her. Same height, same build, long dark hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She stood at the vending machines, back turned to me, motionless. I stared for maybe 5 seconds before she turned. It wasn't her. But her eyes, they were empty. I don't mean sad, I mean hollow, like something had taken her soul out and forgotten to fill it with anything else. She looked at me, held my gaze, and then whispered something I couldn't hear, lips moving without sound, and walked away. I followed her outside, heart in my throat, but she was gone. I mean gone. Nowhere in the lot. No cars pulling out, just sun, heat, and the sound of an old fuel pump chugging behind me. I turned back to the vending machine, and taped to the glass where she had just been standing was a photo, old, faded, curled at the edges. It was a group shot, 7 hikers standing outside a ranger cabin, arms around each other, all smiling. I recognized 2 faces instantly, April and Cole, but the rest? Rangers, young, dressed in uniforms that looked at least 30 years out of date. On the back of the photo, scrawled in faint blue ink, only one came back. I kept driving. The second cabin was deeper into the hills. I nearly missed it entirely, only a sliver of chimney visible above the brush. This one was burned out, scorched black. Roof collapsed. The entire front side gone. I approached slowly, every step crunching through charred debris. Inside, something glinted in the soot. A compass, still working, and next to it, carved into a piece of collapsed beam, "Don't let it in your van." I stopped breathing for a second. It had already been in my van. That night, the knock, the handprint. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, compass on my dashboard, trying to understand what this thing was. Not a ghost, not a person, something ancient, buried. Like the land was more than just rock. Like it had a memory, and it remembers who trespassed. I wanted to leave, to turn the van north and just disappear into city lights. But something held me. Not just curiosity, guilt, fear that if I ran now, I'd carry it with me, whatever it was. That maybe April and Cole weren't the first. Maybe they wouldn't be the last. But I could be the one who understood what was happening. I looked at the map again. One more cabin, just one. Then I'd decide. The third cabin wasn't marked on any trail. I had to park the van beside an unpaved forest road and hike the rest by instinct. No cell service, no signs. Just the compass, the fading lines of the map, and a direction that felt more like pulling than navigation. I walked for hours. The forest was heavy here. Trees grew too close together, and the air was thick with the smell of wet moss and rusted metal like an old junkyard buried beneath the roots. I saw no birds, no squirrels, just silence and a faint vibration underfoot like something enormous was breathing beneath the ground. I stopped when I saw it. Not the cabin, the path. Dozens of boot prints, old and new, scattered, chaotic, like people had been running, then suddenly stopped. And ahead, rising from the woods like a broken tooth, was the final cabin. 2 stories tall, mostly intact. The roof had caved in on one side, but the walls held. The door was slightly ajar. I stepped inside. It was darker than it should have been. The windows, though dusty, should have let in light, but the room drank it instead. Shadows clung to the corners like mold. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Pine, yes, but layered with old sweat, mildew, and something else, a sharp electric scent. Ozone. The second thing was the sound, not loud, not clear, but constant. A low, cycling hum, like distant machinery, coming from beneath the floor. I crept forward. There in the center of the cabin was a trapdoor, unlatched, slightly open. Something cold brushed the back of my neck. Not wind, not breath. Instinct screamed, "Don't open it," but I did. Inside was a narrow wooden staircase descending into darkness. The humming was louder now, mixed with faint knocking, irregular like a hand dragging across wood in frustration. I hesitated. Then I remembered the key I found on the ridge. I pulled it from my pocket, held it in the dim light. It vibrated faintly in my hand. I swear to God, as if recognizing where it belonged. I descended. Each step groaned under my weight. Dust floated in beams from the cracks above like ash suspended in time. The air was colder down there, wet, metallic, and the walls were covered in strange symbols, charcoal lines and looping, unnatural shapes. Not writing, not art, something older. The stairs ended in a square room, not large, not meant for living, and in the center, a metal locker, tall, bolted to the floor. Padlocked, the key fit. I opened it. Inside there were clothes, a ranger's uniform, neatly hung, a name patch, C. Malden, Cole, and next to the uniform, a notebook. Same kind of battered leather as the one I found in the first cabin. I opened it. This one was clearer, less panicked, a real account. We were assigned to monitor the seismic readings coming out of the backbone. We thought it was tectonic, underground plates shifting, but it wasn't. It was something alive. April saw it first, something in the woods, watching, always just behind the trees. But it wasn't a man. It wasn't even an animal. It knew our names. It knocked on the van every night, same rhythm, same 3 beats. And when we stopped answering, it changed the forest. Paths turned in on themselves. Days didn't pass right. The sky stayed gray for a week. We lost track of time, of each other. One morning, April was just gone. No signs, no note. Only a handprint on the window and a whisper I can't forget. You heard it too. Now I hear it under the floor. It wants me to open the door. I won't. I'm locking my uniform away so it doesn't wear me. If someone finds this, burn the cabin. Don't let it use you like it used us. My hand shook as I shut the notebook. The forest didn't shift around you. You shifted for it. I left the cellar slowly, heart thudding, and as I reached the top of the stairs, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Not below me. Above, on the roof. I backed away, eyes scanning the ceiling, breath caught in my chest, another knock, then a slow, dragging scrape, like fingers, long and patient. I bolted through the door, into the woods, not stopping to see what followed. The trees blurred past me, roots caught my boots, the hum chased me. Not a sound anymore, but a feeling, like being submerged in black water. When I finally reached the van, I didn't turn back. I slammed the door, started the engine, peeled out onto the dirt road like something was chasing me. Because it was. Maybe not something I could see, but I felt it there, pacing alongside me, just beyond the trees. I drove straight through the night, didn't stop for food, didn't stop for sleep. I wanted distance between me and that ridge, between me and the thing that wore shadows like skin. But when I finally pulled into a motel on the outskirts of Flagstaff, exhausted, numb, I saw the photo again, folded under my windshield wiper, the same one from the vending machine. April. Cole, 5 others I didn't know. But this time, someone had drawn a thick red circle around my face. I didn't take the photo off the windshield. I didn't touch it at all. I sat behind the wheel of my van for nearly an hour, staring at it through the glass like it might move on its own, like it might open its eyes, like maybe it already had. Because I wasn't in that original picture. I knew I wasn't. I'd seen it in the vending machine, studied it, counted the 7 figures. None of them were me. I wasn't even there yet when that photo was taken. Maybe not even in the same decade. But now I was there, standing at the edge of the group, half-shadowed, face tilted just enough to catch the light. Same jacket I was wearing now, same scars on my knuckles, same haunted look in the eyes. My breath came shallow, a cold sweat rose on my skin. I felt the air around me tighten, close in, like the cab of the van had become a box, a coffin, something built to seal and never open again. I drove with shaking hands. No destination, just motion, just escape. But something had changed. The road signs blurred when I passed them, literally blurred like unreadable text in a dream. The radio stuttered. Every third second, the music would drop out and a whisper would slide in, soft as static. You heard it too. I ripped the aux cord out, turned off the speakers, but I still heard it. Not in the air now, but inside. A sound with no ears, a voice with no source. That night, I pulled into a truck stop on the Arizona-Nevada line, parked beside a row of semis, killed the lights, and locked the doors tight. I climbed into the back and buried myself in blankets, trying to disappear into the warmth. And that's when the knocking started again. This time, not on the side panel. Inside. Under the van, beneath the frame. 3 times. Slow. Heavy. I held my breath. Another knock. The metal groaned like something was pressing up from underneath. I grabbed my flashlight and dropped to the floor, crawling toward the center hatch where I stored my tools. I flicked the light on and pulled up the panel. Nothing. Just the empty cavity beneath the chassis. But something was down there. I could feel it. A pressure. Like standing next to a speaker, pumping bass you couldn't hear but could still feel in your bones. And then the flashlight died. Instantly. No flicker. No dimming. Just black. I froze. And in that dark, I swear I saw it. A shape. Crawling, slow and wrong. Human in outline, but thinner. Elongated. Limbs that moved like liquid. No eyes. No face. Just the suggestion of one, half seen in the black. I slammed the hatch shut and rolled back onto the bed, clutching my chest, heart racing. The van rocked once, like something had pushed it. Then silence. Morning came too bright, too fast. I hadn't slept. My body had shut down for maybe an hour, and when I woke up, everything felt off. Like I'd been moved. Nothing in the van was where I left it. My boots were on the wrong side of the cabin. The driver's seat was tilted back just slightly, and someone had left the notebook open on the dash. Not my notebook. Cole's. The page was new, unfamiliar. It can make things out of memory. It learns your shape, your voice, your guilt. It offers you what you've lost, but only if you let it in. I drove straight to the nearest ranger station, a small outpost near Valley of Fire, surrounded by rock formations that looked like twisted bones. I asked to speak to someone, anyone, about Devil's Backbone. The ranger who came out was old, long white beard, walked like his knees had been broken and never quite healed. He wore a patch that read Sawyer. When I mentioned the backbone, his face darkened. "You been out there recently?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I saw the cabins, the carvings, the disappearances. I found Cole's uniform, his journal, and I think I've seen what took them." He was quiet for a long time. Then he motioned for me to follow him inside. He led me to a back office and unlocked a file cabinet. From it, he pulled a manila folder, thick, yellowed, weathered by decades of dust and exposure. He set it down in front of me. Read. Inside were reports, dozens of them, disappearances dating back to 1953, all from within a 20-mile radius of Devil's Backbone. Same patterns. Solo campers, rangers on assignment, hikers off-trail. In each case, the same elements appeared in witness statements or recovered belongings. Strange knocking, handprints on windows, photos appearing where they shouldn't. You heard it too. In the oldest report, a ranger named Eliza Rourke described a thin figure with eyes like headlights crawling out from a cave near the northern ridge. She claimed it followed her home. Knocked on her cabin every night for a week. She burned her trailer down before disappearing herself. Sawyer said, "They shut the place down for a decade after she went missing, but people kept going back. Always do. Looking for answers, or worse, looking for someone they lost. That's when it gets you." "What is it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nobody knows. Maybe something buried under the fault line. Maybe a tear in the world. Doesn't matter what it is. What matters is how it hunts. It wears your pain like a mask, finds your emptiest part and speaks from it." My voice cracked. "Can it become someone?" Sawyer looked me dead in the eyes. "It became my brother." I sat back, stunned. "I was a ranger in '89, he said. "My brother came to camp with me. First night, we heard footsteps circling the van. Next day, he wandered off trail, gone by sundown. A week later, he came back. But it wasn't him. He didn't blink right, didn't remember things right. And when I asked what happened out there, he just said, 'You heard it too.' I set fire to the whole camp. Never looked back." I left the station numb. There were no more answers. Only this truth. Whatever I'd found, it wasn't done with me. And when I got back to the van, someone had scratched 3 deep gouges into the driver's door. Not words, not symbols, just claw marks. And on the window, another handprint, smaller this time. Feminine. April, or whatever had worn her. I didn't run this time. I didn't drive away or hit the gas or blast music to drown it out. I just stood there, staring at the claw marks. The handprint, the reflection of my own face in the window, pale, tired, older than I remembered. And something else in the glass too, just behind me. Not a shape, not exactly. More like a distortion, like heat rising from asphalt, warping the trees behind it. I opened the door and got in. Not because I felt safe in the van anymore. Because I wanted to see what it would do next. I kept the engine off, no lights, just silence. I waited, and eventually, I don't know how much later, it came. Not footsteps, not knocking, not the scrape of claws, a voice. It came from the passenger seat. Low, warm, almost amused, familiar. "You kept the notebook." I turned slowly, and there she was, April. Exactly as she looked in the photo. Hair tied back, red flannel shirt, little scar on her eyebrow. But she wasn't breathing. Not really. She was pretending to breathe. Her chest rose and fell like a performance. A pantomime. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said. My throat was dry. I couldn't speak. "You've seen what it is," she said. "It's always been here. It waits. And when we break enough inside, when we lose something we can't bear to live without, that's when it shows itself." "You're not her," I finally managed to say. She smiled. "She's in here. Pieces of her. The parts that screamed." My hands clenched on the steering wheel. "You're not supposed to be here," I whispered. April leaned forward, just a little. Her skin flickered at the edges like static. Her eyes didn't blink. "But you are," she said. That's when the smell hit me again. The ozone, thick and sharp, electric and rotten. It poured through the van like smoke, filling every breath. "You brought it with you," she said. I turned the key and slammed the van into reverse, tires screaming against the gravel. April didn't move. She just sat there staring at me. I turned onto the highway, floored the gas, and didn't look back. Not until night fell again. Not until I saw another handprint on the rear window. I started seeing things I couldn't explain. A Ranger vehicle parked off Highway 375 with no one inside. Lights on, engine running, but no driver. A boy walking barefoot through the desert, smiling at me as I passed, eyes milky white, mouth too wide. Billboards that flickered static for a second, then flashed with the words, "Wear his shape. Feed the hunger." I was cracking. I knew it. But I also knew I couldn't go to a hospital, couldn't check into a motel, couldn't explain any of this to anyone without sounding like I needed to be locked away. The only place left to go was back. Not to the cabins. To the source. I found it on an old map buried in the back of the Ranger folder Sawyer had let me glance at. It wasn't labeled, just an empty patch of forest where the contour lines twisted like a whirlpool. The oldest disappearance reports all circled around that spot, Cole had called it the center of the hum. That's where I went. I parked the van just off an unmarked service road, killed the engine, and sat in the dark. The forest in front of me was still. Too still. No wind, no bugs. Just silence. Deep, pressurized silence, like the whole world was holding its breath. I stepped out, and immediately the air changed. Heavier, like syrup. Each step forward felt wrong, like walking into gravity that pulled sideways. The trees began to bend as I moved deeper. Not physically, perceptually, like the forest was folding in on itself, slowly, reshaping. I couldn't tell what time it was. The light filtered through the leaves like underwater sun, green and sickly. That's when I heard the whispers, soft, like a radio behind a wall. I couldn't make out words, but I knew the voices. April, Cole, my own mother's voice, dead 10 years. My father, whom I hadn't seen since I was 16, all of them. Calling me by name, not shouting, not pleading, inviting. And then I saw it, not a structure, a void, a space where nothing should be. It wasn't a cave, wasn't a hole. It was like the forest had refused to grow there, a perfect circular clearing, maybe 30 feet wide, where the earth was scorched black and the air hummed like a beehive. I stepped into it, and everything stopped, even the wind, even my own thoughts. It was like being swallowed. And then I saw it. The shape, not human, not animal. It stood at the far end of the clearing, tall and narrow like it had been stretched too far. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth gray surface where a face should be. But I felt it watching. And behind it, oh God, behind it, were the others. Half seen, hunched, shuddering, like it had worn them too long and discarded the husks. And one of them, one still standing, was wearing my face. I couldn't move. It walked forward step for step, matching me. It didn't breathe. It just was. And when it opened its mouth wide, too wide, I heard every voice I had ever lost speaking at once. You heard it too. I screamed. Not in fear, in rage. I charged. I don't know what I thought I'd do. Fight it, tackle it, rip the mask off. But before I reached it, the ground gave way beneath me, and I fell. Straight down, into nothing, into black, into silence so thick it felt like drowning in ink. And then I woke up, back in my van, parked at the side of the road, dawn just rising, no sign of the clearing, no mark of the shape, no voice, nothing. But in my hand was the photo. And this time every face in the picture, including mine, had their eyes scratched out. The photo wouldn't burn. I tried. I lit a match and held it to the corner of the glossy print, but the flame just hissed and curled away like the paper was coated in something slick, unnatural. I even tossed it in a fire pit I dug by hand, deeper in the desert. No wind, no moisture, nothing to stop it, and still the damn thing wouldn't blacken, just curled like it was playing dead. I left it there, but when I got back to the van, it was waiting for me, sitting neatly on the driver's seat. Only this time my face was gone entirely, not scratched out, erased, no shadow of where I'd been, just an empty space as if I had never existed. That was when I knew. It hadn't followed me back. I had never left. Something broke inside me. Not fear, not panic. Something colder, like a kind of silent resignation. A part of me had suspected from the beginning that this wasn't a story I'd walk away from. That the moment I parked on that cursed trail, the moment I stepped inside that first abandoned cabin and felt the air stare back at me, I was already past the point of return. I took the wheel, started driving, no GPS, no map, just instinct and dread and motion. The land around me didn't feel like America anymore. The sky was wrong, too wide, too low. The mountains seemed to lean inward, like they were watching, and the road kept looping back. No matter how far I drove, I passed the same dead coyote 3 times. Same crushed jackrabbit, same old sign, rusted and unreadable. It was like a track, a loop, a trap. At dusk, I stopped, not because I wanted to, because the van shut off by itself. Every light went out. The engine died mid-turn, and the temperature inside dropped like a stone. I opened the door and stepped out. The desert was silent, not empty, watching. And across the sand, maybe 30 feet away, something stood in the twilight, not the shape, me, or something that looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same posture, same expression of exhausted dread. It raised its hand, and so did I, but not voluntarily. It moved me, like a puppet. I tried to fight it, tried to scream to break the pose, to drop to the ground, but my limbs wouldn't obey. My breath caught in my throat like someone else was borrowing my lungs. The thing across from me smiled and spoke in my voice. "You left the door open." Suddenly I was back in the van, not sitting, slumped in the passenger seat. The driver's seat was occupied by it, me. It didn't even look at me, just stared forward through the windshield. The keys turned. The engine roared to life, and we started driving. I tried to move, couldn't. Tried to scream, couldn't. I was trapped in my own body, or rather beside it, watching this imposter pilot my life. Then the thing turned, and its eyes met mine, and I realized what I was really looking at. It wasn't just wearing me, it was feeding on my fear, on my memories, on every wound I'd never healed, and it whispered, "You made room." That's the part no one warns you about. That grief, if left too long, hollows you, makes space, and something ancient and starved and listening slid into that space. Not all at once, not with claws, but with mirrors. It learns your face, your voice, your deepest ache, and then it offers relief. The van drove for hours, through canyons, past forest lines, into valleys where the trees bent in unison like bowing heads, until we arrived at a campground. Not Devil's Backbone, worse. A place I recognized only in pieces, an impossible patchwork of memories, half real, half dream. April's voice echoed on the wind. "Stay, you're home." The van parked. The engine clicked as it cooled. The thing stepped out, left the door open, and then silence. I sat there for a long time, alone. Body heavy, limbs cold, breath shallow. But finally, somehow, I moved. Fingers first, then legs, then voice. I climbed to the driver's seat and stared at the mirror. My reflection was gone, only the empty seat behind me, and the trees, watching. I turned the engine. It stuttered. Once, twice, then caught. I threw it into drive and did not look back. I don't know how long I drove, days maybe weeks. The roads were all wrong, but eventually the trees changed, the air changed, and I saw a real gas station with people inside. I stopped, got out, walked in like I wasn't sure if I was made of bone anymore. The clerk looked up, gave me a nod. "Rough night?" he asked. I just stared, then asked, "What's the date?" He told me. It had been 6 months. I collapsed in the bathroom, cried until my voice cracked. When I looked in the mirror, my face was back, mostly. But I could still hear it, faintly, in the back of my head. A soft knock, waiting. I don't go camping anymore. I still have the van, but I only park it in driveways now. Lit neighborhoods, streets with kids on bikes and dogs barking at mailmen. No more wilderness, no more stillness. Because out there, past the borders of comfort and safety, something waits. Something that doesn't kill. It replaces. And not with malice, with hunger. If you go looking for someone you lost, hoping the trees will give them back, be ready to give yourself in exchange. And even then, you might just be feeding the echo. Because some disappearances aren't just unsolved, they're unfinished. You want a lesson? Here it is. Close the door. Never ignore the knock, and if the wilderness ever calls you by name, don't answer. Before we dive into the next exciting story, drop a comment below and let me know, what time is it where you're watching from? I'm curious to see where everyone's tuning in from around the world. It started with the fog, not the kind that creeps in like mist off a lake, soft and clean. This was heavier, thicker. The kind of fog that looks like it's holding its breath, like it's waiting for something. I was somewhere between Ludington and Manistee, tucked along a narrow forest road that felt forgotten by time. If you've ever driven a Volkswagen camper through northern Michigan in late September, you know what I mean. The air is sharp, damp with the early bite of fall, and the trees tower in ways that make you feel like you've slipped into some older world. I'd been on the road for nearly 2 weeks, living out of my '84 Westphalia, sea green, rust around the undercarriage, a little temperamental with hills. Her name was Clara after my grandmother, and she'd been with me through breakups, breakdowns, and bad weather. But this trip wasn't just to disconnect. It was to face something I'd been avoiding since spring. My younger brother, Caleb, had died in a solo kayaking accident up near Sleeping Bear. And even though the authorities said it was exposure and a capsized boat, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else had happened, something no one wanted to say out loud, something colder than water and deeper than drowning. So I went looking for answers, the only way I knew how, back to the woods, back to the campsites he loved. The campground I rolled into that evening wasn't on the main maps. It was called Old Wedo Pines, which should have been my first warning, but I'd found it through a hand-drawn mark on one of Caleb's old notebooks. No GPS coordinates, just no signal. Pines lean in, stay one night only. That sounded like him. Cryptic, poetic, a little dramatic, but it pulled at me, and something about honoring the mystery felt necessary. The place was empty when I arrived. No ranger station, no posted signs, just a wooden gate, half rotted, hanging open like an invitation and a threat. I eased Clara through and parked on a flattened patch of dirt next to a stone fire ring that hadn't been used in years. Pine needles layered everything like the forest had been trying to erase this place one flake at a time. It was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no bugs. Just that fog pushing in. I set up camp anyway, popped the top, laid out my flannel sleeping bag, heated some canned chili on the butane stove. Normal routine. I even played a little Simon and Garfunkel from the Bluetooth speaker. The sound of silence felt ironic, I guess. But the silence wasn't just sound. It was spatial. It pressed. It was like the air was thicker between the trees, like something unseen had weight. And I told myself, it's just being alone. It's just your grief. It's just the woods. Around midnight, I woke up to tapping. Not sharp, not metallic. It sounded like a branch brushing against the pop-top, rhythmic, like a hand keeping time. 5 slow taps. Pause. Then 5 more. I waited. Maybe a pine cone had dropped. Maybe it was a squirrel. But the next set of taps came from the sliding door, the metal door. 5 taps. Exactly spaced, measured, deliberate. Now, I've been solo camping long enough to know that fear is often a liar, that it stretches shadows, reshapes sounds. But this was math. This was intention. This was someone or something trying to communicate. I didn't move. Not for a long time. Just listened. Heart pounding like a war drum. No footsteps. No breathing. Just that damn fog pushing against the windows like it was leaning in. Eventually, I cracked the curtain. Nothing. Just fog and outlines of trees that looked vaguely like figures if you stared too long. I told myself again, just wind. Just forest rhythm. But I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, the fog hadn't lifted. It had gotten thicker. The sky was a blanket of wet white, and the sun felt miles away. I stepped outside, boots crunching on the dry pine needles, and noticed something off. All the trees, the ones closest to the van, they weren't standing straight. They were bent, not broken, not fallen, just leaning slightly toward the van. I turned in a slow circle, heart crawling up into my throat. They weren't like that the night before. The air smelled metallic, like old blood and wet iron. My skin prickled, and for the first time in years, I felt watched. I packed up fast, too fast. Didn't eat, didn't brush teeth, just threw everything in the cabinets, slammed the pop-top shut, and turned the ignition. Nothing. Clara coughed once, then died. Dashboard lights flickered, then went out completely. Battery? Maybe, but I'd checked it 2 days ago. It had been fine. Nothing drained it. No lights left on. The engine was just dead. I tried again. Nothing. Third try. Still nothing. I cursed, kicked the clutch, popped the back, and checked the battery anyway. Looked fine. Clean. But I noticed something worse. Across the windshield, in the fog condensation, were marks. Finger streaks. 4 long lines like someone had slowly dragged their hand across the glass from the outside. I hadn't seen them the night before. I stepped back, and as I did, the hair on my arms rose like static. I felt the air shift. Not temperature, but pressure, like the forest was inhaling. Then, from the woods, a sound. Quiet. Almost imperceptible. A clicking. Not animal. Not wind. Teeth. It sounded like teeth. Not chewing, not snapping. Just clicking, like someone chattering their jaw with nothing in their mouth. It came from the left, then the right. Then behind me. Surrounded. I didn't scream. Not yet. Instead, I stood very, very still. I learned that from my brother. Sometimes stillness is safer than running. But even still, I could feel it. A shape close to the ground, watching, not breathing, just clicking, and then a voice. High, childlike, but wrong. Echoed too cleanly in the fog. It whispered from just behind the trees, "One night only." I froze. That was Caleb's note, word for word. My knees went weak. Because that voice, as twisted and wrong as it sounded, had said it exactly the way Caleb would. Same rhythm, same softness, but he was dead. And whatever was out there, it wasn't him. The fog swallowed the sound as soon as it came, like the forest didn't want it repeated. That voice, that imitation, it cut through me in a way that sound shouldn't be able to. It didn't just unsettle me, it violated something inside me, like it reached through grief and memory and scraped. I stepped backward toward the van, slowly. My boots felt loud, crunching against the damp earth and brittle pine. Every sound I made felt like an alarm, like I was alerting something not to my presence, but to my movement. I got to the door, opened it as quietly as I could, slid inside, locked it. Even though deep down I knew locks weren't going to matter here. The clicking had stopped, but now I heard something worse. Breathing from under the van. No, not breathing. A slow drag like fabric against earth. No pattern, no shuffle, just... I grabbed my flashlight, the old maglite that had survived thunderstorms and engine fires, and switched it on. A beam punched through the interior, casting shadows across the cabin. I held my breath. Waited, and then, against every ounce of instinct, I opened the driver's side door, dropped to my knees, and pointed the light beneath the van. Empty. Just needles, dirt, and the smell of metal. I exhaled. My body trembled, not from cold, but from the tightening grip of something more ancient, dread. And then the light flickered. Not the flashlight, the fog. It pulsed, briefly, like a camera flash in the distance. For 1 second, the trees surrounding the campsite shifted. Their outlines bent in the whiteness, and I swear I saw shapes in the mist. Not standing, not walking, crawling. Hands and elbows, pale limbs that moved wrong, like they didn't belong to human shoulders. And they weren't coming at me. Not yet. They were forming a circle around the van. That was when I stopped being scared of what was out there and started being scared of what I was becoming in here. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was losing pieces of myself. Time was breaking. My memories weren't lining up. I tried to think back. How long had I been here? 1 night? 2? When had I last seen the sun? I turned on the van's interior light. Nothing. Dead. My phone was still at 76% battery, but the compass kept spinning, unable to find north. No signal. Of course, I opened Caleb's old notebook again, flipping through it for any other hint I might have missed. There was more. I hadn't seen it the first time. Written between pages in smudged pencil, barely legible unless the light caught it right. They only hunt the grieving. My throat closed. This wasn't a random place. Caleb hadn't just found this campsite. He was drawn to it. Like me, like anyone else whose sorrow made them vulnerable to something old and cruel and patient. The forest didn't kill him. It fed on him. I slammed the notebook shut. I needed to get out. I didn't care if I had to hike 20 miles to the nearest road. I would not die here. I would not become something that clicked and whispered and wore my brother's voice like a mask. I grabbed my boots, a thermos, my pack, stepped outside, and the entire world changed. No trees, no path, just fog and ground. The van was still behind me, but everything else erased. This place wasn't just secluded. It was sealed. And yet, somehow I knew which way to walk. The fog pulled at me gently, like a mother's hand guiding. I followed. Maybe because I had no other option. Maybe because some broken part of me wanted to see whatever Caleb had seen. After maybe 10 minutes, the fog parted just enough to reveal something new. A clearing, but not natural. Rocks had been arranged in wide circular rows, hundreds of them. Some the size of fists, some the size of skulls, symbols carved into each, weathered, eroded, and in the center, an old wooden bench, split in the middle, blackened with age. Sitting atop it, as still as death, was a figure, not moving, not breathing, but human, or used to be. It wore a dark flannel shirt, jeans, hiking boots, my brother's clothes. I stepped forward, slowly whispering his name. Caleb? The figure didn't move, didn't blink, but something did shift in the clearing. The rocks. They began to hum, a low vibration like insects buzzing beneath the earth. The fog danced above them, curling into shapes, arms, faces, mouths open in silence. I was shaking so badly I nearly dropped the flashlight. But I had to get closer. 5 more steps. The figure's face became visible. It was him, but his eyes were gone, just hollow sockets, full of black ash. His skin pale and stretched tight, mouth slack open in a silent O. But there was no decay, no smell of death. He hadn't rotted, he'd been emptied. Like someone had taken everything that made him him, voice, memory, soul, and pulled it out like thread from a needle. I collapsed to my knees, my hand reached forward before I could stop it, touched his knee, and then a voice inside me, not from my ears, not from the clearing, from my mind. It spoke in my brother's tone, but twisted, slurred with sadness. Go back before they choose you too. I stood up, gasping, stumbling backward. The fog surged, shapes lunged out of it, not fully formed, but enough to move, crawling, grasping, dozens of them, whispering names I'd forgotten, places I'd buried, guilt I hadn't faced. They didn't want my body. They wanted my grief. It was food. I turned, ran, back toward where I thought the van had been, back through the forest that had no beginning and no end, and the whole time they followed, not fast, not loud, just patient, clicking, dragging, waiting for me to stop and feel. I didn't, not yet. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct in me screamed to, because the sound was close now. The clicking wasn't distant anymore. It was right behind me, overlapping with something else, a dragging, slithering breath, as if the fog itself had lungs. I crashed through trees that weren't there the night before, ducking beneath low limbs, stumbling over stones that seemed to rise out of nowhere. My boots slipped against soft, wet moss. Branches clawed at my coat like fingers, like they didn't want to let me leave. The deeper I went, the more I realized something terrifying. The forest had changed me. I couldn't remember how many nights I'd been there. I couldn't even remember what day of the week it was. All I knew was fog, pine, silence, and dread. My internal compass, the one I'd relied on through all my years of camping, all my solo nights in Clara, was gone. But something else kicked in, something deeper than sense or memory or logic. Survival. I ran until my legs gave out, until the ache in my chest throbbed like a second heart. When I finally collapsed to the ground, panting, eyes burning from the cold sweat stinging them, I realized I was back. The van. Clara stood exactly where I'd left her, unmoved, untouched. But something was wrong. The trees were closer. I swear to God, they were leaning in. Pines bending at unnatural angles, trunks warped like ribs caving in on a wounded animal. Their shadows curved around the van like hands. I limped to the driver's side, tried the ignition out of blind hope. Click. Click. Dead. I slammed my fists against the wheel, screamed into the silence, but the scream didn't echo. It was absorbed, swallowed by the fog, like a confession whispered into a stranger's ear. Then I remembered what the voice in the clearing had said. Go back, before they choose you too. Choose me for what? I turned around, looked back at the trees. Shapes were moving again, but slower now, more cautious, like I was no longer prey, like I was being weighed. A different kind of fear took over, not panic, not terror, but urgency. Something primal. I tore open the glove box, pulled out the emergency flare, only one left. I lit it. The hiss of the flames sliced through the silence like a blade. Red light bloomed in a small, violent circle. The fog recoiled, and the trees, they shrieked. Not out loud, not sound, but a feeling, like the forest itself cringed from the light. I could feel it in my bones. Every knot of pine, every hidden thing pulling back just enough to give me space. For the first time in days, maybe hours, I could see the outline of the road, or something like a road. Barely wide enough for Clara. I didn't think. I didn't pray. I just opened the van's rear hatch, grabbed the spare marine battery I kept in the back for emergencies, popped the hood, and swapped it in with trembling hands. Seconds passed. The fog pressed harder. The shadows started crawling again. The clicking returned, but now frantic, desperate, like something starving. I got back in the driver's seat, turned the key. Clara coughed, once, twice, then roared to life. Tears sprang to my eyes, not joy, not relief, but something more desperate, the feeling of being just barely alive. I slammed the gear shift into reverse, spun out of the circle of leaning trees, and peeled onto the dirt track. The van bounced, groaned, metal screaming against potholes and pine roots. But she moved. The fog chased me. I saw it in the mirror, like it was being pulled toward me, unraveling itself, reaching in long gray tendrils that curled around the taillights. Then the road ended, abrupt. Sharp, blacktop. Somehow, impossibly, I was back on a highway. The fog stopped like it hit a wall, not retreating, just hovering at the edge, like it wasn't allowed to cross. I pulled over, hands shaking, headlights illuminating an old green road sign. M55 east to Cadillac, 14 miles. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe more, until the sun finally began to rise over the tree line, orange and wide, breaking through the fog with lazy defiance. And I cried, not because I made it out, but because I almost didn't. 2 weeks later, I got the call from the DNR office in Manistee. I'd sent in Caleb's notebook, hoping someone would make sense of the coordinates, of the strange carvings of the voices. The man on the phone, an older ranger named Hollis, sounded uncomfortable. "I don't know what you think you saw, son," he'd said, "but that campground, Old Widow Pines, it's not real." I paused. "What do you mean, not real?" "There's no record of it. Not in any logs. Not in any historical surveys. And I've been working this region for 34 years. If it was a legit site, I'd know. Closest thing we had to that name was a homestead back in the 1930s. A woman lived out there with her son. Both disappeared. Locals say it was grief. Husband died in a fire. She went mad. Carved strange symbols in the trees. They say she used to walk the woods, calling for things to take her pain away." "What things?" He went quiet for a long time. Then, flatly, "There are places in these woods, son, that don't belong to maps. Places that open only when you carry something heavy enough. That's all I'll say." He hung up. Since then, I haven't gone back to Michigan. Clara still runs, mostly. I keep her tuned, keep the cabinet stocked, keep the lights working, but something in me changed that trip. Not just fear, not just survival, awareness. I still camp alone, I still chase silence, but I don't trust the woods the way I used to, because grief isn't just a feeling. Sometimes it's a signal, sometimes it opens doors, and sometimes those doors don't lead back out. It's strange what fear doesn't do to you. I always thought fear would fade, or at least dull, once you got back to safety. I assumed that the body, once it knew you were okay, would loosen its grip, lower its guard, let you sleep. But that's not what happened. What happened was the opposite. When I got home to Ohio, when I finally parked Clara outside my little one-story place in Athens and collapsed onto the couch, that's when the worst part began. The quiet. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It wasn't calm. The quiet now had an edge, a thin, invisible blade that hung in the air, always ready, always near the skin. And at night, that's when it clicked. Not literally. Not the sound from the forest, but a feeling. A snap deep inside the mind, like a door opening that I hadn't realized I'd left unlocked. I would wake up sweating, always at the same time. 3:47 a.m., I'd sit up, heart pounding, waiting for the fog. Not metaphorical, not emotional, I mean the actual fog. Waiting for it to roll beneath the doorframe, rise up from the floorboards, carry the sound of something crawling across the ceiling. But nothing ever came. And that was worse, because it meant whatever had marked me didn't need to appear anymore. It had already gotten what it wanted. About a month later, I found myself doing something strange. I was mapping campsites again. Late at night, headphones on, satellite maps pulled up on my laptop. Not searching for places to go, not really. Searching for patterns. A geometry of absence. I started noticing things. Clusters of disappearing trails in the Upper Peninsula, campgrounds listed in old Forest Service logs that no longer existed. Even archived RV blogs, ones I'd followed for years, had strange gaps in their entries. Posts removed, videos deleted, whole GPS logs gone. One forum post in particular haunted me. It was from 2014. A solo camper named Denise, traveling with her dog and her 73 VW Riviera. She'd posted about finding a non-marked site near the Manistee Forest. Said it wasn't on her maps, but looked maintained, like someone had used it recently. She mentioned weird symbols on birch trees. Her final post ended with a sentence I'll never forget. Dogs started growling at 3:45 a.m., thought it was coyotes. Heard someone whispering my name in the exact voice of my ex. He died in 2009. Then, nothing. Her account never posted again. That was what did it. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't alone. This thing, this hunger hiding in certain parts of the woods, it wasn't a spirit or a monster or something you could burn out with sage and salt. It was more like a frequency. Something that found you when your signal was low, when your defenses were down and your grief was screaming out through the trees. And here's the worst part. I think some of us go willingly. About 6 weeks after my escape, I drove Clara south. Not to camp, not to heal, but to test something. There's a part of the Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky, Red River Gorge, where the tree lines get so thick the sun barely touches the forest floor. I'd camped there years ago, back when I still believed trees were neutral. Back when I believed the worst thing that could happen was a bear or a busted axle. I pulled into a primitive site miles from anything paved. No rangers, no families, just wild silence. I parked, I waited. At 3:30 a.m., I stepped outside, stood still, listened, and then I whispered my brother's name, just once. The silence responded, not with sound, not with shape, but with weight. The air around me grew dense, the wind died, the scent of cedar turned suddenly metallic like rust, and I realized something awful. It wasn't Michigan, it wasn't the campsite, it was me. Wherever I went, it would follow, or rather, it would arrive, if I let it. That's what they never tell you about grief. It doesn't just hurt, it invites. I packed up and left before dawn, but something stayed with me. And over the next few weeks, the clicking returned, subtly, at first in dreams, then on long drives, then once in the shower, right before the hot water died without reason. But I didn't run. This time, I decided to face it, to ask. There's a ridge in Tennessee called Raven's Hollow, a place where the fog settles low in the valley and the trails seem to twist on themselves. I parked Clara at a turnout, lit no fire, and sat on the roof until the stars blinked out. And then I spoke. Not a ritual, not a seance, just words. My words. I told the woods I was ready to listen. I told them I knew what they were, that I knew grief had made me adore, and I asked, "What do you want from us?" The forest didn't answer in language, but it did respond. I felt it. A presence behind me watching, and then faintly something else. A voice, not Caleb's, not mine, a woman's, cracked with age, soft like tree bark after rain. She whispered, "We only take what you no longer wish to carry." And then the cold hit me, deep, inside my chest, like something had reached in and touched the part of me where grief lived. The pain didn't go away, but the weight shifted, redistributed, like it had been shared. Since that night, I've never heard the clicking again, but the fog still follows now and then, and I let it, because I understand now. Not all hauntings are meant to torment us. Some are there to remind us that what we survive, we become. I don't tell many people this story. Not because I'm ashamed, not even because I'm afraid they won't believe me, but because once you know how thin the line is, the line between the real and the remembered, between maps and myths, it changes how you speak. You stop using words like just a coincidence or probably a dream. You start listening. And when you live your life on the road, in a Volkswagen built in the early 80s, held together by years of dirt, sweat, and obsessive maintenance, you learn that listening is survival. Because the road doesn't lie, the woods don't pretend, the silence will always answer, if you ask the right question. And I think I've finally figured out what that question is. It's not, what was that thing in the woods? It's not, why me? The real question, the one I wake up with, the one I carry with every tank of gas, every mountain pass, every lonely mile through places too quiet to name, is this: what am I carrying that's heavy enough to open the door again? Because once you've felt it, the pull, the whisper, the strange kindness of something ancient offering to take your pain, you know the truth. You don't escape the forest. You just learn to walk beside it. This summer, I found myself in northern Arizona, high desert country, the kind of land where the pines don't crowd, where the sky stretches so wide you forget you're small. Clara hummed beneath me, her engine hot with altitude, her frame creaking with the familiar protest of age and loyalty. I pulled into a site west of Flagstaff. No reservations, no signs, just space, a clearing between boulders, prickly with juniper and wind. The air smelled like sun-bleached rock and pine sap. And that night, I slept deeply. No sounds, no fog, no clicking. But right before I drifted off, I had a moment, a flash of that woman's voice, the one from the ridge in Tennessee. We only take what you no longer wish to carry. And I realized something that finally made the grief shift inside me. I've been carrying my brother for 15 years, ever since the accident, ever since the wreck that took him while I was 1,000 miles away, chasing nothing in the California desert. I wasn't there to hold his hand. I wasn't there to say goodbye. And I think, without knowing it, that's why I started camping. Not for escape, not for thrill, but because I needed the silence to scream into. Because out here, the world slows down enough for grief to take shape. Out here, the ache becomes something you can point to. A bend in the road, a quiet lake, a fogged-over trail with no destination. There's a power in these places, not just danger, not just dread, but something older. The woods, especially in Michigan, especially in that crooked band between Grayling and the Manistee River, they remember what we forget. They echo the things we bury. They open not to swallow us whole, but to show us what we refuse to face in daylight. Some people never come back. And I get it now, because sometimes if you don't have someone waiting on the other side, a person, a purpose, a reason, it's easier to stay with the silence, to dissolve into it. But I did come back, and now I carry something new. Not just grief, but meaning. Not just memory, intention. I camp differently now. I don't just find places that feel safe, I find places that feel true. And when I hear the wind shift at 3:47 a.m., when I see the fog roll through the trees just a little too fast, I don't panic. I close my eyes, I breathe, and I listen. Because there's a conversation happening out here, one that's older than engines, older than lanterns, older than the idea that the woods are something to conquer. It's a conversation between what we are and what we've lost. And sometimes if you're still enough, if you've emptied yourself enough to let the weight rise, the woods will speak. Not to hurt you, not to scare you, but to mirror you, to say, we remember and we're listening too. So, if you're ever driving north, past Grand Rapids, past Cadillac, past those winding roads no one seems to monitor anymore, and you find yourself lost between a name on a map and a place that doesn't appear on GPS, trust your instincts, trust your fear, and above all, trust your grief, because what you carry matters. And sometimes it's the only thing that can open the door, but only you decide if you walk through it. This is why I still camp, not to run from the shadows, but to remember who I was inside them. Because somewhere out there, beyond the trail markers, beyond the cell signal, beyond the comfort of paved sites and camp hosts, there's a truth waiting in the fog. A truth that says you're not alone, not in your fear, not in your loss, and not in your hope. You just have to listen and keep the engine running, just in case. I never used to be afraid of the dark, not until I learned what hides in it. I was 43 when I bought my first RV. After a long and bitter divorce and a career that had burned me out from the inside, I needed escape, not just from the city, but from everything I thought I understood about myself. The road, it called to me. Endless, anonymous, wide open. I told myself I was chasing peace, but in truth, I think I was running. Maybe still am. That first summer, I drove west from Missouri. By the time I hit the Colorado state line, I'd gone through half a notebook scribbling thoughts I couldn't say aloud. The mountains rising ahead felt like a kind of promise. Like if I could just disappear into those trees, I might find what I'd lost years before. I pulled into a quiet little campground just outside Gunnison, elevation nearly 8,000 feet, trees thick as stories. I remember the smell of pine sap and the high-altitude air that made my chest ache. My neighbor that night was a retired biology teacher named Phil, in his late 60s, traveling solo in a tiny teardrop camper. We shared coffee and firewood. He told me he'd seen mountain lions before, but only from a distance. Said they don't usually come near campgrounds. Said that like it was a comfort. The first night I slept well, but the second, I woke up cold. Not just chilled, bone cold, like something had reached inside me and flipped a switch. It was 2:43 a.m. I remember that exactly because I stared at the red digits on my RV clock while my breath fogged in front of me. The heater was working, all systems green, and still I felt like I was being watched. Then came the sound. It was subtle at first, like a soft dragging in the pine needles. Something deliberate. Too slow for a deer, too quiet for a bear. My heart began to race, not from noise, but from the stillness that followed, like the woods were holding their breath. I sat up, eased the curtain back. The moon was bright that night, silvering the tops of the trees. And just outside the edge of my sight, maybe 30 feet out, I saw it. Two eyes, low to the ground, reflective, unblinking. They didn't move like prey, they watched. I froze. My brain tried to rationalize maybe a raccoon, but no, these eyes were too far apart, too level. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the shape shift, just enough to reveal muscle, fur, and a long, low body. Mountain lion. Every instinct screamed to slam the RV door shut, lock it, make noise, anything. But I stayed frozen, watching it watch me. Phil's voice echoed in my mind. They don't usually come near campgrounds, usually. The cat didn't lunge, didn't growl, it just turned slowly and disappeared into the undergrowth like smoke. And yet I didn't sleep again that night. I kept hearing things. Branches cracking, my own heartbeat pounding like footsteps in my ears. In the morning, I told Phil. He listened, nodded solemnly. Then he told me something I've never forgotten. They get curious when people bring smells. Bacon, trash, pets. Sometimes they follow you before you even see them. Sometimes they watch for days. He paused. The trick is realizing you're not at the top of the food chain out here. Not really. I left Gunnison that afternoon, stomach knotted. I told myself I was just moving on, like all RVers do, but I checked my rearview mirror too often. Drove too fast. Weeks passed. I kept heading west into Utah through arches of red stone and whispering winds. And for a while, the fear dulled. I convinced myself it was a fluke, one eerie night, one curious cat. I even started to laugh about it over campfires. Then came Arizona. The desert has a way of tricking you. By day, it's heat and light and sky. At night, it's bone silent, empty in a way that feels cosmic. I parked at a remote BLM site about 2 hours north of Flagstaff. No hookups, no neighbors, just me and the wind. On the third night, the silence broke. This time, it wasn't a predator that came, it was prey. Around midnight, I heard a strange squealing, high-pitched, desperate. It came from just beyond the brush line. I stepped outside with a flashlight, cautious, scanning the low scrub. The beam caught movement. Small, frantic, a jackrabbit. But it wasn't alone. Just behind it, half-crouched, was a coyote, emaciated, its fur patchy, ribs visible. It didn't run from the light. Instead, it looked at me, and I swear, it smiled. Not in the human way, but in the way something starved sees a new variable in the equation. I yelled, threw a rock. It backed off slowly, like it didn't quite believe I was a threat. I went back inside, locked up, but again, I couldn't sleep. Every so often, I'd hear it circling. A soft scrape of claws, a low yip, and each time it came closer. Near dawn, I cracked a window. That was my mistake. The smell hit me first. Rotten, musky, acrid, like wet dog and decay. And then through the screen I heard it. Breathing, right outside the window, slow, rhythmic, measured. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just listened to the sound of that starving animal imagining ways it might reach me. It stayed there for an hour, maybe more. And when the sun finally rose, the smell went with it. I didn't see the coyote again. But I started keeping a journal of sounds, of smells, of moments when the environment turned against me. By the time I reached California, I'd convinced myself that I was learning something important. That fear in its purest form was teaching me how to live, how to listen, how to see. The redwoods near Crescent City were cathedral tall, and the air was wet with moss and rain. I parked in a forest campground so dense the light barely made it through by noon. Locals said it was beautiful, mystical. I found it heavy. I met a couple there, Dana and Marcus. Early 30s, both teachers on sabbatical, traveling in a rented Winnebago. They had a golden retriever named Elsie. Sweet dog, a bit anxious. On the second night Elsie vanished, we searched everywhere, miles of trail, called her name until our voices cracked. No signs, no sounds, just the oppressive weight of green. Around 4 a.m. I was lying awake, heart still aching from that low, guilty sense of helplessness when I heard a bark. Short, sharp, then silence. I woke Dana and Marcus. We followed the sound, flashlights cutting through mist, and there, half buried in fallen needles, we found Elsie, alive. But something had tried to drag her, claw marks on her side, fur missing, deep cuts. Whatever had taken her had tried to pull her underground into some kind of tunnel or burrow. The ranger later told us it was likely a badger den. But the size of the opening? Way too wide. He didn't have an explanation. None of us slept again that night. That was the moment the fear changed for me. It stopped being about animals. It started being about patterns, about how nature isn't just something you visit. It's something that can watch, follow, adapt, and sometimes remember you. I left Crescent City 2 days later. Dana and Marcus stayed behind to get Elsie checked by a local vet, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen, the way the earth had been opened, like a mouth that decided to close again before anyone noticed. Driving south along the coast, the fog started to feel heavier, like it wasn't just water in the air, but something denser, older. The farther I went, the more I noticed how the trees seemed to bend, not from the wind, but toward the road. Watching. Always watching. I ended up parking for the night at a remote site near Big Sur. High cliffs, sharp wind off the ocean, no cell signal. I liked it that way, or at least I told myself I did. That night, the ocean was louder than usual, not the calming, distant hush you expect. It was more uneven, crashing in bursts, followed by silence that felt too long, like something was interrupting the rhythm of the tide. At 1:17 a.m., I woke up to tapping, light, rhythmic, not at the door, on the back window. Now, I don't have rear access on my rig. That window is high up, about 6 feet from the ground, and there's no ladder back there. The only thing behind me, tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I listened. The taps came in clusters of 3, then nothing. Then again, tap, tap, tap. Not knuckles, not claws, something softer. Fingertips? No. I grabbed my flashlight and edged toward the rear. My breath caught before I even got there. The smell, salty but wrong. Not ocean, like wet fur and rotting fish. I turned on the exterior lights. Nothing. I waited 5 minutes, 10. Then I did something I still regret. I stepped outside. The air was ice cold, moonless. The only sound was the wind slicing off the cliff's edge. Then behind me, something moved. I turned, too fast, slipped in the gravel. My flashlight skittered away, beam spinning. I scrambled to grab it, and as I did, I saw just for a second a shape, pale, gaunt, long-limbed. It stood on the edge of the cliff like it had been waiting for me to come out. I swear to God, it smiled, and then it dropped backward into the dark. I didn't sleep. I locked every latch, turned every light on, sat up in the driver's seat with a kitchen knife on my lap until sunrise. When the sun finally broke over the trees, I found footprints in the gravel, bare, human-shaped, but longer, too long. That was the last time I camped near a cliff. After that, I moved inland. Central California, then Nevada. Spent a week in the desert trying to forget what I'd seen. I told myself it was the dark playing tricks, my eyes misfiring, trauma echoing back, but the fear wouldn't go away. Not anymore. By the time I reached Zion National Park, I was sleeping during the day and driving at night. I didn't trust what waited in the still hours. I met a guy there, Caleb, mid-20s, free-spirited, the kind of person who lived out of his van with a grin on his face and dust in his hair. He was hiking Angel's Landing the next morning, told me to come along. I declined, said I was just passing through. That night, I parked in a small lot outside the park boundary. Only one other vehicle there, Caleb's van. At around 3 a.m., I woke to a high-pitched whimpering. Not animal. Human. I opened my window just enough to hear. It was Caleb, calling my name, whispering it, over and over. The problem was, I could see his van, the lights were off, the doors shut, no movement. Still, the voice came again, closer this time. Hey man, it's me. Come outside, I need help. I didn't move, I held my breath. Then something knocked, not on my door, on the back of the RV. 3 times. Knuckles this time. I turned slowly. Out my rear window, I saw movement. Something crouched behind Caleb's van. It stood slowly, too tall. It had Caleb's voice, but not his shape. Long arms, head tilted too far, joints bending the wrong way. It stepped forward, and as it moved into the moonlight, it changed. For a split second, it looked exactly like Caleb. Same hoodie, same stance. But the face wasn't quite right, like someone had tried to recreate it from memory. Then it smiled. Too wide, too many teeth. I slammed the shade shut and crawled to the front of the rig, heart jackhammering. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. At first light, I knocked on Caleb's van left. He was inside, groggy, half asleep, no idea what I was talking about. He hadn't left his van all night. That was the first time I seriously considered that something might be following me. And not just watching, learning, imitating, trying to draw me out. I left Zion like my tires were on fire. No goodbyes. No morning coffee. Just white knuckles on the steering wheel and the silent understanding that I couldn't stay still too long anymore. It felt like the longer I stayed in one place, the more it found me again. Whatever it was. I didn't talk to anyone for days. I avoided eye contact at gas stations. I parked only where there were street lights or fences or people. But none of it helped, because the next time, it didn't come from outside. It came from inside the RV. I was parked just outside Carson City, Nevada, small state campground with cracked asphalt and dying trees. One of those places you choose when you're too tired to keep going, but too wired to sleep anywhere scenic. There were 2 other rigs in the lot. No one waved. No one talked. No one talked. I was halfway through a reheated bowl of chili when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. From the bathroom. Now my RV is only 22 feet. Tiny bathroom. No one could be in there unless they broke in without a sound. But I heard it. Just once. A breath, deep, damp, ragged. I stood there for a minute, spoon still in the air, listening. Silence. Then, again. Inhale, pause, exhale. I opened the bathroom door. Nothing. No sound, no smell, nothing. I laughed it off, out loud, like a maniac. Maybe I was cracking. But then at 2:12 a.m., I woke up to my own voice, coming from the bathroom, repeating the same words over and over. I saw you, I saw you, I saw you. Low, monotone like a recording. I couldn't move. My arms were ice, my mouth wouldn't open. Sleep paralysis? Maybe. Except I wasn't asleep. The voice stopped, then silence again. I forced myself up, rushed the door, and flung it open. Empty. But the mirror, there was a handprint, a wet handprint, on the inside of the glass. 5 long fingers, dripping. And I hadn't showered in 3 days. I started sleeping with the bathroom door duct taped shut after that. That was the night I admitted something had changed. Something had crossed over. I no longer believed I was dealing with wildlife, or even cryptids. This was something else, something using the wild places like a mask, a doorway. I drove straight to Oregon, hoping the rainy coastal forests might give me cover. I told myself that whatever it was, it couldn't follow forever. That maybe it was tied to certain lands, certain energies. I ended up outside Tillamook, parked in a forest campground that looked like it hadn't seen a ranger in months. The ferns grew up through the fire pits. Moss hung like curtains from every limb. It felt like time didn't move there. But at least it was quiet. Too quiet. And then the birds stopped. Not just less noise. No noise. Total stillness. It was around 6 p.m., just before sunset, when I heard what sounded like an owl. Low. Warbling. From the tree line, then another. But they weren't answering each other. They were syncing. Repeating the same call at the exact same time, like a loop. Like a lure. I recorded it, played it back. It wasn't owls. It was someone pretending to be owls. But wrong, like they'd only ever heard it once and were trying to get it right. I stayed inside the rig, lights off, eyes wide. Then, just past midnight, something brushed the side of the RV. Not hard. Not like an animal bumping it. It was soft, slow, like a hand trailing along the length of the metal. I held my breath. Then the knocks started. 1, pause. 2, pause. 3, like it knew I was counting. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And then it knocked back the same rhythm I used to calm myself, the one I tap with my fingers sometimes when I'm nervous. How did it know that? I packed up and drove through the night. No destination, just motion. I couldn't afford stillness anymore, because stillness was where it found me. And wherever I went, the wild was always there, watching, listening, learning. It was around this time I started having dreams. Not nightmares, worse, dreams that were almost normal. Campfires, lakes, other RVers waving in slow motion. But in every dream there was one animal watching me, a grizzly. Always at the edge, never moving, never blinking. Its eyes glowed not with menace, but with something worse. Recognition, like it knew me. And I knew it. Every night the same bear, always closer than the last dream, until one night it spoke, not with words, with thought, with presence. I remember what you did. I woke up with blood under my fingernails, my own, scratches across my arms I couldn't explain. There were no animals at that site, no people, just me, the wind, and a memory I couldn't access. That's when I realized something deeper. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even about being hunted. It was about being claimed. I crossed into Montana without meaning to. I'd driven for 13 straight hours, not trusting the sky, the shadows, or my own thoughts. By the time I looked up, I was pulling into the Bitterroot Valley under a bruised pink sky. The air was thick with pine and rain. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe you. The kind that warns. I hadn't spoken to another human being in over a week. My reflection looked thinner, eyes too deep, beard growing wild, and worse, I noticed something new. Behind me, in the mirror, always just behind me, a flicker, a shape, never enough to define, but always there. Watching. I chose a primitive campground, no hookups, no other rigs, just a dirt pull-through between trees that leaned a little too far over the road, a place no one wanted, exactly what I needed. That night, I started a fire, sat in silence, no journal, no music, just the flickering glow of cedar crackling. And in the flames' hiss, I heard a voice. Not words, not at first, more like breath, language without shape, but then clear as bone against wood. Why did you come back? I stood up fast, spinning with the flashlight. Nothing. Trees, shadows, wind. That's all, except it wasn't wind. The trees weren't swaying, they were shivering. I didn't go back inside. I stayed by the fire, eyes wide, blade at my side. Something told me not to go into the RV, that it would be waiting. Then, behind me, twigs snapped. I turned. There was a bear, not charging, just watching. 20 feet away, golden fur like tarnished copper under the moonlight. Massive shoulders, eyes locked onto mine. I didn't move. I knew better. But it didn't act like a bear. It didn't sniff, didn't grunt, didn't blink. It just stood there like a statue wearing a bear's skin. And then it made a sound. A whisper. A human whisper. You left me there. I fell back, my flashlight tumbling into the fire ring. Sparks flew. For one wild second, I saw the bear's face change. Not physically, but something behind its eyes. It remembered me. And I remembered too. I was 16, a hunting trip with my uncle in Montana, snow in the trees, a cub, half dead, caught in wire. Uncle told me not to touch it. If you save the baby, he said, you curse yourself to answer its mother. I ignored him. I freed it. It bit me before running off. 3 days later, we found the mother's body in a ditch, bullet in her skull. Not my uncle's doing, poachers, but I had touched the bond. I had intervened. And in the old stories, intervention is invitation, especially in the wild, especially where the rules run older than your bloodline. Now, standing there decades later, I saw the truth. That bear wasn't a bear. Not anymore. It was the spirit of that broken moment, walking in fur, wearing my memory like a mask. It turned and walked back into the trees without a sound. I stayed up till dawn. When I woke the next afternoon, there were claw marks on the RV door. 5 deep rakes across the metal. No blood, no break-in, just a message. You are seen. I left Montana, tried heading east, Wyoming, South Dakota, but the wild followed. Not just in forests, even in the high plains, even in windswept open lands, there was always a shadow, always the echo of footsteps outside when I slept, always the smell of wet fur and copper when I opened the door in the morning. And worse, my thoughts were no longer just mine. At night, I'd wake mid-sentence, speaking languages I didn't know. Once, I caught my reflection smiling back when I wasn't. That's when I knew I couldn't run anymore. I had to return. Not to where I saw the bear, to where I touched the balance. The cub, the wire, the place where I first broke the rule. I traced the maps, old campgrounds, forest roads that no longer showed up on GPS. And I found it. Southwestern Montana, near the Ruby River. A campsite that had long been closed after a fire decades ago. But the clearing remained. I parked there alone. No reception, no way out except the road I came in on. It was quiet. The sky bruised with dusk, the trees bowed like they remembered me. I stepped out barefoot, let the ground feel me again, let the weight of memory settle in my bones, and then I said it. I'm sorry. No wind, no rustling, just the snap of a branch behind me. I turned. The bear. Same eyes, same silence, but this time, it wasn't alone. From the trees stepped other creatures, a mountain lion, a coyote, a moose, all too still, all watching. Behind them, shadows moved upright. Human? No, not quite, something older. I fell to my knees. The bear stepped forward. I braced for pain, for claws, for teeth, but it just stared. And then it turned, walked into the dark. One by one, the others followed, until only silence remained. I waited. Nothing, and for the first time in months, I slept, not in fear, but in surrender. When I woke, the forest felt different. Lighter, maybe. Not safe, no, but honest. Like it had seen me, heard me, and now it had decided. I stepped outside. The air smelled of pine sap and frost. The sun was rising behind the trees, its rays broken into gold slivers by the limbs above me. No claw marks, no footprints, just the earth, undisturbed. But I wasn't undisturbed because I felt something inside me had shifted. Not healed. No, you don't heal from things like this, you carry them. Like scars under your ribs, like whispers in your dreams. But there was clarity now. The wild, it doesn't hate us. It's not cruel. It's not vengeful. But it remembers. And more than that, it teaches. And I had been a stubborn student. You grow up thinking the wild is something out there, something you visit, something you conquer, something you take photos of and leave behind. But that's the lie we tell ourselves to keep our egos safe. The truth is the wild enters you. The longer you stay out here in the trees in dust and silence, the more it rewires your rhythm. Your breath slows to match the hush of pine needles falling. Your eyes learn to read shadows not as threats, but as language. You begin to listen again. Not just hear. Listen. And when you listen, you realize that nature is not quiet. It screams. It sings. It warns. The problem is we stopped listening long ago. My encounters weren't just fear and trauma and madness. They were a message. Each animal, each sound, each impossible echo. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to wake me up. And they did. Because the truth is, I wasn't running from wildlife. I was running from my own forgetting. From the part of me that broke the balance and thought there would be no cost. Every step I took into the wild thinking I was just camping, just sightseeing, just exploring, I was being watched. Not by eyes, by memory, by the land itself, and it remembered everything. That first careless campfire I left half lit in Utah. The discarded food that almost brought a bear to someone else's tent in Idaho. The way I laughed off the ranger's warnings, the way I shrugged at posted signs, thinking I knew better. And especially, the way I ignored the truth the night I freed that dying cub. I thought I was helping, but I didn't ask permission. I didn't know the rules, I do now. So when I finally left Montana, I didn't leave with relief, I left with respect, with reverence, with a deep and sobering understanding that when you enter the wild, really enter it, you don't get to decide the terms. You don't get to just visit and leave unchanged. You trade something, time for memory, safety for truth, comfort for meaning, and sometimes that meaning shows up in the shape of a bear with human eyes. Sometimes it speaks to you in dreams, sometimes it follows you through canyons and rivers and mirrors until you break open enough to receive what it's trying to say. Now, when I camp, I do so differently. I walk barefoot on sacred land, even just for a moment to feel the pulse under the dirt. I sit in silence long enough to let the trees introduce themselves. I burn sage not as decoration, but as gratitude, and I never ever leave food out, because I know better now. Not just about bears and cougars and venomous snakes, not just about the signs and warnings and weather patterns, but about myself, about what it means to be part of something bigger than asphalt and Wi-Fi and grocery stores. The wild isn't a place you go, it's a mirror you step into. And if you look long enough, if you really listen, you'll see everything you've buried, everything you've forgotten, everything you need to remember. That's what RV camping gave me, not escape. Not thrills, but truth. And sometimes the truth comes in the shape of claws and teeth and voices in the night. But if you survive it, if you surrender to it, it gives you something back. Something older than language, something sacred, a bond, a second chance, a way to begin again, not as a visitor, but as a part of it all. They say the desert hides what it wants to keep for itself. I never believed in that kind of talk. Old sayings passed down from broken men and wide-eyed loners with too many ghost stories and not enough sleep. I used to think the only real dangers on the road were dehydration, engine trouble, and the occasional drunk pulling out of a county bar with one eye open. But that changed the summer I went looking for silence and found something else entirely. My name's Will. I'm 43 now. Been running this rig, my '88 Volkswagen Westphalia, for almost 20 years. She's got a soul, I swear. Still growls on the first turn, still moans in the cold mornings like an old dog stretching. I always camp solo, not because I'm some hardened loner, but because it's the only time I can hear myself think. That trip started like all the others. Heat rolling in waves off the blacktop, Arizona stretched out in every direction like a red canvas someone set on fire. I had just finished a week filming in the Grand Canyon region for a piece I was editing on solitude and the American West. I wanted to unplug, just me, the van, and whatever secret corner I could find on the map. A ranger I'd chatted with at a gas station had mentioned a place, not on the brochures. Old Ghost Road, he called it. North of Bisbee. Said it twisted through the Mule Mountains and ended in a place they never got around to paving. Used to be an old mining route, he said, but the ground out there, it swallows things. That should have been enough. I should have listened. But curiosity is a kind of hunger, and I was starving. I pulled out around noon, sun hammering the windshield like it was mad at me. The air conditioner had long since died, but I didn't mind. The heat sharpens the senses, makes the world feel alive. The deeper I went into the backcountry, the quieter it got. Signal dropped to nothing. No bars, just dirt and scrub and shadows stretching longer than they should have in mid-afternoon. About 10 miles in, I noticed the road narrowing, barely wide enough for the van. The brush got thicker, and the wind, which had been steady all morning, just stopped. Not died down, stopped, like someone had thrown a switch. Then the smell hit me. It was faint at first, like copper and something spoiled, but persistent. The kind of smell that crawls up the back of your throat and settles behind your eyes. I thought maybe I'd run over a dead animal, but the road was clean. Bone dry. I kept going. That's what I do. I keep going. By late afternoon, I reached the spot, hidden in a hollow between two crumbling ridges. There it was, a flat patch of red earth tucked between outcrops like a natural amphitheater. An old fire ring, charred black, a rusted shovel leaning against a dead stump, and silence so loud it made my ears ring. I parked the Westie facing east, like I always do. Set up camp, popped the top, opened a warm beer, and sat down in the camp chair with a journal in my lap. The stillness had weight to it, like something pressing down, flattening the world. The smell was gone now, replaced by the dry bite of sage and sunburned stone. I should have left when the wind stopped. I should have turned back when the birds didn't come back at dusk, but I stayed. The first knock came just after dark. 3 taps. Soft, precise, not frantic, not animal. I froze, listened. Nothing. My flashlight swept the ridgeline. The circle of light caught nothing but rock and dust, no eyeshine, no movement, just the same hollow quiet. I told myself it was the van creaking, metal expanding, maybe a branch falling, even though there were no trees. I cooked dinner with my back to the van. Just couldn't shake the feeling. You know when someone stares at you too long, when your skin knows before your mind catches up? That's how it felt, like I was being studied. I forced myself to eat. You don't survive the road by giving in to nerves. But that night, I didn't write in the journal, didn't sip whiskey by the fire. I crawled up into the bunk early, heart beating too loud in the silence. Then the second knock came. Louder. Closer. 3 taps again. Same rhythm. I grabbed the flashlight and leaned out the top canvas. The desert stretched still and empty in the beam. My breath fogged in the cool air. That's when I saw it. On the far ridge, silhouetted against the stars, just for a second, a figure. Tall. Too tall. Its arms hung low, nearly past the knees. Head cocked slightly sideways like it was listening to the earth breathe. Then it was gone. I didn't sleep. All night, I heard it. Shifting sand, crunch of gravel under something heavy. Once, a long dragging sound, like something being pulled across stone. I waited for dawn like a drowning man waits for air. When the sky finally softened to pale orange, I stumbled out, boots unsteady, hands numb from gripping the flashlight all night. I packed fast, too fast. My fingers kept fumbling buckles and zippers. Every sound echoed, too loud, too close. Then I found the footprints, just outside the van. Not boot prints, not animal tracks. Bare feet, human. But huge, wide, splayed toes. 4 of them, and something else, something worse. A handprint. Pressed into the dust like clay, fingers long as knives, no thumb. That's when the whisper started. Not in my head, not imagined. Real. Carried on the wind that had returned only to deliver it. One word, over and over. Stay. I stood there staring at that word, hearing it ripple through the brittle sagebrush like it had a mouth, a breath, a will. Stay. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, the kind that didn't come from outside you night, but straight from underneath your ribs, like something had wormed in and decided to speak using your own damn bones. I did what every instinct told me not to do. I looked up, not just to scan the ridgeline again, but higher, beyond it. The sky. It was wrong. Not darker, not stormy. Just off. The stars didn't look right. The arrangement, like someone had scraped a thumb across the night and smeared the constellations out of place. I could see Orion's belt, only it had 4 stars. The Big Dipper bent at an angle that would have broken its own spine. And there was a humming. Low, electrical, not in the ears, in the teeth. I dropped everything. Tools, cooler, journal. Shoved it all into the Westie. Didn't even roll the extension cord back in. Just threw it. My hands were shaking too hard anyway. The engine cranked slow, like the van was reluctant, like she felt it too. On the 3rd try, she turned over, coughed once, and rumbled to life. I threw it into gear and backed out so fast I barely missed a boulder I didn't remember being there the night before. I didn't look in the rear view. Wouldn't have mattered. I could feel it. Something following. Just outside the corner of the mind, where nightmares crouch. The road looked different going out. Twists where there hadn't been any. A rise in the dirt that made the van tilt sharp to the left like it was being nudged. The landscape was the same, but not. like a painting someone had redrawn from memory and missed the details. And the wind was back, only it wasn't wind. It had weight, like it moved with purpose, like it was tracking me, brushing just along the metal panels, whispering against the rust like it knew the van's name. At mile 6, the radio turned on by itself. Nothing but static. Then, through the fuzz, a voice. Not a full sentence, just fragments. Don't. Stop. Wrong way. It's inside. I reached out and yanked the knob off the dash, snapped it in my hand. The voice kept going. No power, no signal, no logic. Just a voice that didn't belong coming from a place that shouldn't be able to speak. That's when the headlights cut out. And I saw the figure again. This time, it was standing in the middle of the road. No features. Just a shape, impossibly tall and thin. Skin like faded leather, pulled too tight across joints that bent the wrong way. It didn't move, didn't flinch when I slammed the brakes and swerved. I passed right through it. I swear to God, it passed through the windshield, through me, like cold smoke. And in that moment, every sound died. The engine, the tires, my heartbeat, everything. For 3 full seconds, I was in silence. And in that silence, I saw things, not with my eyes, behind them, images. A canyon swallowing a sky full of bats. A woman screaming in a language no one speaks anymore. An old man kneeling in the desert, burying something with his bare hands. And that word again, but louder this time. Stay. I came to with the van idling on flat road, headlights flickering back to life. The figure was gone. I drove. Didn't stop. Not for gas. Not for food. Not until I hit the highway and saw other cars. Real people. Movement. Noise. Reality. I pulled over at a Shell station outside of Tombstone. Pried my fingers off the steering wheel. They were white. Cramped like I'd been holding on for dear life, which I had. Inside the station, the clerk looked up from her newspaper, then looked again. "You all right?" she asked. I wanted to lie, say I was tired, say it was heat stroke, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. "I saw something," I said. She nodded. Not surprised. "You went up Ghost Road, didn't you?" My heart stuttered. I didn't answer, but she didn't need me to. She pulled out a folded map from under the counter, paper, real old school, and pointed to a blank stretch of terrain. No roads, no marks, just empty. They paved over the trailhead 10 years ago, said it was too unstable, too many disappearances, but folks still find their way back. I leaned in closer. "There was someone up there," I said, "or something." She looked me dead in the eye. "There always is. That land don't forget, and it don't forgive." I left the station with shaking hands and a full tank. Slept in a Walmart parking lot that night with every window cracked and every light on inside the van. Thought I was safe. Thought I'd left it behind, but I was wrong. The next morning, the handprint was back, pressed into the rear window. Same size, same 4 fingers, same lack of a thumb. Only this time, it was on the inside. I didn't scream. Not at first. I just stood there in the morning light, staring at that print through the condensation. My breath clouded the glass around it, but the print stayed clear, like it was pressed there from inside, recently, deeply, intentionally. I opened the sliding door slow, holding my breath like that might keep whatever was in there from moving. The air inside the van was cold, colder than it should have been for a July morning in Arizona, the kind of cold that clings to your skin and makes your thoughts feel brittle. I swept the van front to back, cabinets, bed, cubbies, even under the sink. Nothing. But it didn't feel empty. I don't know how to explain it right. It was like the van was holding its breath, like it was waiting for something. And I could feel it too, like there was a second set of lungs in my chest, breathing just a fraction behind mine. I drove for hours after that. Just pointed the van east and kept moving like speed could outrun memory. Every town I passed, every highway sign, they all looked the same. Like they'd been painted over in a rush, off color, slightly out of proportion. Like someone tried to rebuild the world from a bad photo. I didn't sleep that night either. Parked at a KOA in Deming, plugged in like normal, locked every door. I even pushed the big cooler against the sliding door just to hear it move if someone or something tried to come in. Nothing happened. But the next morning, the handprint was back again. Same place, same size, but fainter now. Almost like it was fading, or like it needed to press as hard anymore. That's when I noticed the voice recorder. I use an old handheld Olympus to log notes, keep track of ideas for the channel, thoughts on the road, things I see. I hadn't touched it since the night on Ghost Road, but now it was sitting on the dashboard, blinking. It had recorded something. 36 minutes of audio. I hit play. Nothing at first, just the soft creak of the van's walls cooling in the desert night. My own breath, slow and ragged in the background. Then, static. Not white noise, wet static, like something bubbling underwater. Then the voice, not mine, not human. Gurgling, whispering. Not in English, but in something that scratched at the corners of understanding. My ears didn't know the language, but something deeper did. Something primal and buried under the bones. And then, clear as glass, it said, "You were not invited." I dropped the recorder. It kept playing. "You saw what is not yours. You heard what should stay buried. Now you carry it." I yanked the batteries out, threw the whole thing into a dumpster by the KOA bathroom, drove out with the side door half latched, not even stopping to close it. I headed north, through New Mexico into Colorado. I didn't care where I landed as long as it was higher, cooler, different. Ended up at a little site outside Pagosa Springs, San Juan National Forest. Tucked among the pines, the kind of place that smells like moss and old wood and feels like a sleeping animal curled around you. I thought maybe, finally, I'd outrun it. I spent 2 days there, hiked, drank hot coffee, slept with both eyes closed for the first time in weeks. No handprints, no knocks. I started to believe maybe I'd imagined it all. The way trauma sometimes distorts, reshapes events until they don't fit anymore. I started thinking maybe I just cracked a little out there. That I needed rest, not answers. Then the kid showed up, 6 years old, maybe 7, blonde, barefoot, walked into my campsite like he knew it. No parents, no sounds from the trail, he just appeared. I stood up slow. "Hey buddy, you lost?" He looked at me with eyes that were too still, not scared, not even curious, just still. Then he said, "You shouldn't have taken the sound with you." My throat closed. I backed up a step. "What sound?" He blinked once, slow. "It doesn't like to travel, now it's in the trees, and the trees are angry." Then he turned around and walked straight back into the woods. I called out, ran after him. But when I turned the first corner in the trail, he was gone. Just gone. I went straight to the ranger station that afternoon, reported it. They sent out 2 guys, young and underpaid, who combed the trail for an hour and shrugged. "No reports of missing kids. Maybe a local," one of them said. "They wander out sometimes." But there was something tight in his jaw when he said it, like he didn't believe it either. That night, the knocking came back. This time, not on the van. From the trees. First 3 taps, then 5, then 8. Like it was learning or counting. And the smell returned, that coppery rot curling at the edge of the air, thick and hot and pressing down against the roof of the world. I didn't wait for morning. I packed everything in the dark, left my camp chair behind, tore the power cord straight from the pole, and drove down that mountain like I was being chased by fire, because in a way, I was. And I still am. There's a sound your tires make when you're going too fast down a mountain. Not a screech, not a skid, just this high-pitched whine, like even the road is warning you. Slow down, you're not supposed to be here. I didn't listen. Didn't even blink until I hit the edge of town. And when I did stop, when I finally pulled the Westie over behind a diner in the dim light of 5 a.m. haze, I realized my hands were bleeding. Not cuts, just blood. Smears along the insides of my palms, as if I'd been holding onto something sharp all night without knowing. I sat there for a long time, trying to slow my breath, trying to pretend the world was still solid, that all the pieces still fit. I don't know how long I sat there before the cook came out. Big guy, apron still dusted with flour. He lit a cigarette, glanced over at me, then did a double take. Came walking over with this slow, careful gait. Not cautious, exactly. Just respectful, like he'd seen this before. "You get caught up there?" he asked, motioning vaguely to the west, toward the mountains I had just barreled down. San Juan? I nodded. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at the van, then at me. You smell it? That question cracked something open in me. I nodded again. It's like blood and rust and something old, like turned dirt, like something buried too long. He took a long drag on the cigarette, exhaled slow. Yeah, that's it. What is it? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. Thinner. He looked up at the sky like he was trying to find the right words in the cloud cover. Some folks say the land remembers. Others say it's more like a scar. You touch the wrong place. You peel back something that didn't want to be seen, and it follows you. Don't matter if you drive or fly or run. If it knows your name, it'll find you. My name? He didn't answer. Just looked at me. That same look I'd seen in the ranger's face, in the gas station clerk's eyes. Not fear. Pity. He handed me a napkin. Clean your hands, and don't sleep under trees tonight. Then he walked back inside like it was just another Tuesday. I sat there until the sun cleared the horizon and the smell faded, but it didn't leave. Not really. It just settled somewhere deeper, somewhere inside. That was 4 weeks ago. Since then, I've tried to outrun it. Flagstaff. Santa Fe, truth or consequences, back roads and Bureau of Land Management sites, wide deserts, high plateaus. Nowhere feels untouched anymore. Nowhere feels still. It's like I opened something, a door, maybe, or worse, a memory. And now it's in me. I see things, not just out of the corner of my eye, but full on. Shapes that flicker between trees, standing still until I look at them, then gone. Voices that don't echo, sounds that repeat when they shouldn't. I've recorded every night since. I have audio files I can't explain, tapping rhythms that increase based on where I park, static that turns into breath when I slow it down, words in languages that don't exist. Some of them I've started to understand, not because I know them, but because they feel familiar. One night outside Roswell, I woke up to the sound of dirt moving, not footsteps, not an animal. Dirt. Shifting, like something was being dragged under it. I opened the door, heart in my throat, flashlight in hand, swung it out across the dry wash where I'd parked. Nothing, except a line in the dirt, not from an animal. No paw prints, no tire treads, just a long, straight groove from the edge of my van into the darkness, like something had crawled out or in. I followed it for a while, maybe 100 feet, until the groove ended at a pile of rocks. I wouldn't have thought anything of it until I noticed the rocks weren't resting on the ground. They were stacked. Precisely. Deliberately. Like a tiny cairn, but too smooth, too symmetrical. And there was something else, a feather, wedged between the stones, perfectly upright, like a marker, like a warning. I turned and ran, didn't care if I tripped, didn't care if something followed. I just knew I wasn't supposed to be there. Back in the van, I locked every door and drove until I ran out of fuel. Slept that night, slumped over the wheel in the parking lot of an old casino. I used to think fear was adrenaline. Now I know it's something colder, quieter, like drowning, but with your eyes open. And no matter how far I drive, it's with me. Not the figure, not the smell. The silence. The knowing that whatever I touched out there, whatever I heard, wasn't meant for me. But it saw me anyway, and it remembers. I keep telling myself I'm not the first person to break out here. People have been camping this land in vans and Volkswagens since before I was born. Dreamers, drifters, veterans, divorcees, retirees with satellite radios and nothing left to prove. Most of them don't talk about the strange things. Not in videos, not on message boards, not even in bars when they've had too much to drink. Because once you start talking, it makes it real. And once it's real, it finds you again. But I'm talking now because I don't have a choice. Last night, something changed. I was parked on the edge of a dead lake bed near Animas, New Mexico, flat as bone, open to the sky, the kind of place that feels untouched by time. No trees, no hills, just cracked earth and stars. I thought I'd found peace again. No smells, no prints. Just me in the van and the low hum of a world that had finally left me alone. But sometime around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of a door unlatching, not fully opening, just clicking free. I stayed still, didn't move, didn't breathe, because I knew that sound. I knew it wasn't the wind, and I knew every damn latch in that van, how they sound, how they feel. The side door, the one I always double check. I sat up slow and reached for the mag light under the pillow, clicked it on, and right there inside the van, standing between the sink and the closet, was a man, or what was left of one. He was tall but hunched as if his spine had curled inward, skin pale and too smooth, like paper left in the sun too long. No hair, no lips, just this waxy stretch of skin where a mouth should be. But the worst part was his eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were looking out the window, at something behind the van. I didn't speak, didn't scream. I just stared, frozen, while he, or it, kept peering outside like I wasn't even there, like I was incidental. And then in a voice like dry grass brushing against canvas, it whispered, "It's almost open." Then it turned, not toward me, not away, just turned inward, folding in on itself like a shadow slipping back into a wall, and it was gone. No movement, no sound, just empty air and the echo of something I couldn't name. I didn't sleep after that, didn't even blink for a while. The sun came up eventually, casting long stripes through the van windows, and I drove without thinking. Past Lordsburg, past Bowie, into the flat guts of southern Arizona, where the roads stretch out like scars across the desert. I should have stopped, should have turned around. But part of me needed to know, needed to get closer, even if I didn't know what it was. So I drove to Chiricahua. They call it the Wonderland of Rocks, but that name doesn't do it justice. Like something was halfway through making mountains and changed its mind. Giant columns of stone stacked like forgotten gods, waiting for someone to remember their names. I parked just off Pinery Canyon Road. Secluded spot. No other vans in sight, no hikers, just the rocks, the wind, and whatever had been following me for weeks. I didn't even bother unpacking, just walked straight into the maze of stone. And that's when I heard it. A low hum, not from above, from below, like a throat buried in the earth preparing to speak. It vibrated through the soles of my boots, into my knees, up my spine. Not sound exactly. Resonance, something, remembered. The kind of hum you feel in your teeth. I climbed higher, between the spires, around the ridges. My legs burned, lungs scraped dry, but I couldn't stop. Not until I saw it. An opening. Not natural, not carved, built. Perfect archway about 5 feet high, hidden between two leaning stones, framed in symbols I didn't recognize, but felt like I should. I didn't go in. I wish I could tell you I was brave enough to step through, but the truth is, everything in me screamed. That hum was louder now, like a choir of buried voices chanting in reverse. And for the first time I realized, this isn't something I found. This is something that wanted to be found. And it had chosen me. I ran, nearly fell off a ledge, scraped my arms, tore my jeans, didn't care. I just needed distance, space, silence. But when I got back to the van, the engine wouldn't start. Not even a click. Battery, full. No mechanical reason. Just stillness, like the van had made a choice too. So I waited, sat on the roof as the sun set, watching the stone pillars glow orange and then fade into shadow. And for a few minutes, everything was quiet. But just before full dark, the knocking started again. Not on the van this time. From the canyon walls, from the air, from inside me. Knock. Then silence. Then again. Knock. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, rhythmic, like a signal meant for someone or something that understood. I sat on top of the Westie, arms wrapped around my knees, heart thudding in time with the sounds. The desert below was soaked in moonlight, silver and soft and cruel. The rock spires around me no longer looked natural. They looked like watchers, silent, still, and suddenly much closer than before. I whispered out loud, not sure to who, "What do you want from me?" But the knock didn't answer, not directly. Instead, the wind shifted. It carried a smell, not the metallic scent I'd come to dread, not blood, not rust. This was older, char, bone, the acrid perfume of something sacred that had been defiled long ago. Then the hum returned, low, subterranean, but layered this time, with breath, with voice. I jumped down from the roof and tried the ignition again. This time it turned, not smoothly, not like a machine, like something waking up under protest, groaning back to life. I didn't ask questions, just drove, Didn't matter that it was dark, that the road curved like a serpent between the cliffs. I had to leave. I had to believe I still could. But as I pulled onto the main road, something caught my eye in the rear view. There was someone sitting in the back seat, no movement, just the silhouette. Shoulders too high, neck too long, like it had forgotten how to be human. I didn't turn around, didn't scream, didn't cry. I just kept my eyes forward and drove, past the trees, past the rocks, through towns that blurred into ghosts until the desert was behind me. Until I reached a Walmart parking lot outside Tucson, flooded in halogen lights and the safety of people who had no idea what I'd seen. Only then did I check the back. Empty. No indentation on the seat. No prints, no sign. But the smell was there. Burnt hair, wet ash. I slept with the windows down and a knife in my lap. In the morning, I told myself I imagined it, that I'd been sleep-deprived, malnourished, delusional. That's what fear does, right? It rewrites the rules of logic until nothing makes sense. I stocked up on food, water, and coffee, took a shower in the Planet Fitness down the street, tried to ground myself in routine, but the normalcy felt fake, like a mask I was trying on. Everyone around me looked like cardboard cutouts, talking, laughing, unaware that just a few miles east, the desert was opening its mouth. So I did what I always do when I need answers. I found someone older. His name was Leo, retired Forest Service worker. I'd met him once at a campfire talk in Utah months earlier, a no-nonsense kind of guy who didn't smile much, but whose voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen things. I found his number in an old notebook and called. Didn't even say hello. I just said, "Leo, I think I brought something back with me." There was a pause. Then he said, "Where?" "Chiricahua." Another pause. Longer. "Did you follow the humming?" My stomach turned. "Yes." "Did you go through?" "No, but I saw it. The arch, the stones." "You should have left it alone." "I tried." "No, you tried too late." His voice wasn't angry, just tired, like someone who'd given this warning too many times. He told me a story then, one he said wasn't written down anywhere, about a man in the 70s who disappeared for 3 days in the exact same canyon. When he came back, he was barefoot and bleeding, with symbols carved into his chest, backward, as if someone had written into him like clay. He never spoke again. Not a single word until he died. Leo said they'd found him years later, in a trailer parked beside an arroyo, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling like it held some terrible truth. The only thing he'd left behind was a journal with one phrase, written over and over. "It wants to be remembered." Leo sighed. "It doesn't want worship, doesn't want blood, it just wants witness, and once you've seen it, you're part of it." I asked what I could do. His voice softened. "Tell the truth, while you still remember who you are." Then he hung up. That night, I pulled off I-10 and parked beneath a stand of ironwood trees. I lit a fire, set up the camera, opened my notebook, and I started talking, not to my subscribers, not to friends, but to myself, trying to hold on to what's left of the man who started this trip, the man who just wanted stars and silence and the open road, because something is unraveling now. Not out there. Inside me. I haven't slept in 3 days. Not real sleep anyway, just flashes. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. Not the thing in the van, not the humming stone, not the silhouette behind the seat. I see the door. It's not always the same shape. Sometimes it's made of bark, sometimes of stone, sometimes it's just light, like something trying to remember how to be solid, but it's always there, waiting. And every night I get a little closer. I've stopped staying in campgrounds, stopped following the apps, the maps, the guidebooks. I drive until the road gives out, until GPS forgets who I am. I park in the shadowed places, the ones that feel hollow, like the land itself is holding its breath. I started keeping track of the knocks. They come at 1:03 a.m., always. No matter where I park, no matter how far I drive, one knock, then three, then silence, and then the smell. It's subtle now, faint, like the scent left behind after someone walks through a room too quickly. But it's always the same, charcoal, wet stone, and something alive. Not flesh, not decay, something raw, ancient, something that was never meant to have a name. I keep trying to remind myself who I am, my name, my family, where I'm from. I repeat it like a prayer every morning. My name is Eli. I was born in Portland. I built out this van myself in 2021. I came here for peace. But each time, it feels thinner, more fragile, like a story I'm telling myself, and not one I fully believe anymore. I thought the road would save me. I thought movement would keep the fear behind me. But what if the road is the lure? What if the van isn't an escape, but a vessel? What if it was always meant to deliver me to this? Last night I dreamt I was underground, not buried, just deep, in a room made of sandstone and ribs, wide, arched, echoing. I wasn't alone, but the others weren't human, not anymore. They stood along the walls, heads bowed as if listening, and from the far end of the chamber, something approached, not walking, not crawling, spilling, a shape that wasn't a shape, fluid and bone, smoke and teeth, whispering in a language that felt like hunger. It didn't look at me, but I knew it saw me, and it said, not with words, but with certainty, "You're ready." I woke up with blood in my mouth. I don't know how it got there. No cuts, no wounds, just a metallic taste that wouldn't fade. I didn't eat that day, just drove. Southeast toward the Arizona-New Mexico line again. Part of me thought maybe going back would help. Face it, unmake it. But that's the lie fear tells you, that there's ever a way back. The truth is, I'm not the same man who left Oregon. And the van, my sanctuary, my home, my machine, is changing too. At night, the walls feel softer, like skin stretched over frame. The floor creaks when no one's walking. And the mirrors. God, the mirrors. I covered them days ago after I saw something behind my reflection. Something smiling side my face, even while I was crying. And now I can't remember what my real face looks like. Just flashes, just pieces. I know how this sounds. I know if you're watching this or listening to it, it seems like madness, and maybe it is. But madness doesn't come all at once. It's not a switch. It's erosion. Grain by grain, day by day. A shift so small you don't notice until one morning you wake up and realize you don't remember the sound of your mother's voice, or the color of your childhood room, or the shape of the person you used to be. You just remember the door, and how it's always closer than it was yesterday. The air is thinner now, not in altitude, in presence. It feels like I'm driving through a world that's slowly forgetting how to be real. The trees blur when I look too long. The road hums beneath the tires like it's trying to speak. The sky has taken on that bruised blue before a storm, only there are no clouds, no wind, no rain. Just wait. I'm somewhere near Portal, Arizona. No signage, no cell service, just a memory of a forest road someone once mentioned in a thread I can't find anymore. There's no one around. I haven't seen another camper, hiker, or ranger in days. Only ravens. They follow me now, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, but always odd-numbered. They land near the van and wait. They tilt their heads when I speak, and I swear to you, last night, one of them whispered. It didn't caw, didn't chirp. It whispered. One word, come. So I did. I followed the dirt road as it curved into the hills, into a basin carved from ash and time, and there it was, the archway. The same shape from the Chiricahua Canyons, the one I didn't enter before, but this time it was waiting for me, unburied, whole, awake. The symbols around the edges glowed faintly in the moonlight, not light as reflection, but like something inside them was stirring, remembering. I stopped the van and stepped out. No flashlight, no camera, just the hum in my chest that had never fully left. And I walked through the arch, into the hollow. The moment I crossed, the air changed. It wasn't cold or hot. It wasn't dry or damp. It was empty, like the molecules here had been borrowed from somewhere else and didn't quite know how to exist. And then from the dark, the knocking, not wood, not stone, inside me, like bones remembering something the mind had forgotten. The chamber I stepped into wasn't vast, but it felt endless. Curved walls, covered in markings, not drawn, not etched. Grown, like the space itself was alive and had been dreaming in silence for centuries. At the far end, I saw a shape, not a monster, not a man, just a figure, hunched, watching. It didn't move, it didn't need to. Because the moment I saw it, I remembered. I remembered standing in this same place in another life, another version of me, another road. I remembered the feeling of stepping through, not once, but many times, across lives, across dreams, across roads that always led back here. I wasn't chosen. I was returning. The figure didn't speak, but its presence filled my mind, and what I felt wasn't fear, not anymore. It was recognition. The door wasn't evil. It wasn't cursed. It was memory. Raw, unfiltered, dangerous because of what it shows you. It doesn't consume you. It reveals you. The knocking? That's not it trying to get in. It's you on the other side trying to get out. And all this time, I was the one knocking, begging to be remembered, begging to be seen, begging to return to the version of me that understood before the world dulled it down with noise, fear, routine. In that moment, in that cave, I let go, not of my name, not of my sanity, but of the lie that this world was ever simple. I walked back through the arch before dawn. The sky was cracked open with stars. The ravens were gone. So was the smell. So was the fear. And when I climbed back into the van, it started on the first try. Smooth, quiet, like it had just come out of a long sleep. I drove west as the sun rose, out of the desert, out of the shadows, out of the places that don't show up on maps. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I'm healed or haunted. I only know this. Some places aren't meant to be camped in. They're meant to be witnessed, because they carry a memory too old for language and too vast for reason. And if you listen, really listen, they'll show you not who you are, but who you've always been. So if you find yourself pulled toward the empty places, the ones no one talks about, the ones that hum when the wind dies, don't run. Don't fight. Just remember to knock first. And whatever answers, don't look away. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped trusting the silence, but I do remember the sound that replaced it. It was this faint, almost deliberate tapping, like someone dragging a branch across the siding of the RV in a slow, calculated rhythm, just enough to make me pause, but not enough to make me run. That's the kind of fear that lingers out here, not in the howling winds or the wildlife scratching at the brush, but in the things that wait. My name is Daniel Morales. I'm 52 years old, born and raised in Nevada, and I've been RV camping most of my adult life. I've crisscrossed the country in every season, parked beside sun-drenched rivers and beneath snow-choked pines. I've weathered lightning storms in Death Valley and driven through the blackened wreckage of post-wildfire Montana. I'm not new to the road. I know the risks, I know the rules, but nothing prepares you for a place that doesn't want you there. This story happened 3 summers ago. I just come out of a rough divorce, 21 years, split clean down the middle except for the memories. I needed a break, something solo, something long. So I took a 6-week sabbatical from the auto shop I ran in Reno, packed up my 1987 Volkswagen Westphalia, and told myself I'd go off-grid for a while. Clear my head, just me, the road, and whatever quiet was left out there. About halfway through the trip, I hit Utah. That red rock country always had a way of making me feel small in a good way. I drove aimlessly for hours through dusty 2 lanes and skeletal gas stations with Coke signs that hadn't been updated since Clinton was in office. Around dusk, I came across this weathered old sign on a split rail fence that read, "Welcome to Jericho Pines RV Park, Eston 1974. It wasn't on any of the maps I'd marked out. No reviews, no recent photos, not even a mention in the RV forums I followed religiously. That should have been my first clue. But there was something about it, a kind of faded charm. The place was tucked into a grove of sickly pines, so dried out, they rattled when the wind moved through them. The park gates were wide open. No office lights, no ranger, just the low metal clang of a wind-battered American flag on a rusty pole. I don't know why I drove in. Maybe it was the way the light hit the gravel lot, or maybe it was that desperate part of me looking for something no one else had touched. The place was still, not peaceful, still, dead still. There were about 20 pads, most of them half swallowed by weeds, concrete splitting like skin. A couple old RVs were still parked there, sun-bleached and forgotten, their tires cracked and flat, no lights inside, no movement. It felt like the aftermath of something. I picked a spot near the back, close to a dry creek bed. The air smelled like dust and battery acid, and something else I couldn't quite place, sweet, almost like rotting fruit. I chalked it to old trees or maybe some roadkill nearby. I told myself it was temporary. One night, just enough to rest, and then I'd move on. I ate dinner cold, canned chili and crackers. No fire, no music, just the quiet hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the van settling. I cracked open a beer and leaned back in my camp chair, eyes on the stars through the thinning pines. And that's when I saw the first light. It came from one of the dead RVs about 4 sites down. A faint bluish glow like the kind old TVs used to give off in motel windows. Just a flash, then gone. I stared, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. Rubbed my eyes. Nothing. Then it happened again. A flicker. Then movement. Slow, like someone pacing behind frosted glass. Now look, I've been around long enough to know better than to go poking around other people's business. Especially not in an abandoned park with no cell signal and no ranger in sight. But there was something off about it. That RV hadn't looked livable. No water, no power, and judging by the sag in its roof, not even safe to stand in. So what the hell was the light? I stayed put. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't high. I just sat there, beer sweating in my hand, watching that blue light flash every few minutes. No pattern, no sense. Just there, like it wanted to be seen. Or like it didn't care if it was. Eventually it stopped. The movement, the flickering, gone. And that should have been the end of it. But the real problem started just after midnight. I woke up to tapping, soft at first, inconsistent, just enough to break through the layer of sleep and make me listen. I checked my watch, 12:41. The tapping kept going, not on the door, not on the window. It sounded like it was coming from the roof. I froze. If it had been an animal, I'd have heard skittering. Paw sounds. A bird might land hard, but this was gentle. Intentional, like fingers. I sat there, pulse climbing, trying to convince myself it was wind. But the air had gone dead still again, that eerie, breathless kind of quiet where even the trees seem afraid to rustle. The tapping stopped, then something heavier landed on the roof. I felt the van shift, just barely, but enough to know that something was up there. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stared up at the ceiling, heart hammering, waiting. 5 seconds. 10. Then I heard it. 3 slow steps like something dragging itself across the top. Not hurried, not clumsy, measured, and then it was gone. I waited another hour before I dared open the door. Nothing but dry night air and a dozen stars staring down like eyes. I climbed onto the roof. Nothing. No prints, no scratches, no animal droppings, no evidence at all. Just the hum of distant crickets. That should have been my sign to leave. But the thing about fear is it doesn't always come with a neon warning. Sometimes it feels like a whisper, a suggestion, an itch at the back of your mind you keep convincing yourself isn't worth scratching. So I stayed. God help me, I stayed. The next morning, I was up before sunrise. I told myself it was because I wanted to get on the road early, beat the desert heat, maybe make it up to Fish Lake National Forest before dark. But that was a lie. The real reason was that I hadn't slept. Not really. I just laid there in a cold sweat, ears on high alert, every creak of the van tightening something in my chest. I stepped outside and tried to shake it off, told myself I was tired. That fear makes things up. It exaggerates. I mean, maybe it had been an animal, a raccoon, a bobcat, hell, even a curious bird. Nothing unusual, nothing worth panicking over. But there was something wrong with the air that morning. You ever step outside and feel like the world's tilted, just slightly off its axis? Like you're walking into a room that someone left in a hurry but forgot to shut the door behind them? That was Jericho Pines that morning. The pines didn't creak, the wind didn't move, the usual buzz of flies, gnats, bird calls, gone. It was like the whole place was holding its breath. I packed up quicker than usual, didn't even finish my coffee. Just stowed everything and fired up the Westphalia. The engine sputtered once, then caught. Relief swept over me like a warm wave. I backed out of the spot, glanced once at the abandoned RV with the blue light, and froze. The door was open, wide open. Now I know I didn't dream that light the night before. I'd watched it blink for almost an hour. But that RV had looked sealed, sunken in, unoccupied, dead. And now the door swung gently, lazily, like something had come out but forgotten to close it behind. I should have driven, should have gunned it straight out of that cursed park and never looked back. Instead, I walked toward it. My boots crunched on gravel as I approached. The air got thicker with each step, heavy and warm like the inside of a sealed attic. That strange sweet smell, overripe and sour at the same time, hit me hard, stronger now. I held my breath as I reached the steps, looked inside. The RV was trashed. Rotted floorboards, peeling wallpaper, empty cans scattered like someone had left in the middle of dinner a decade ago. A cracked mirror above the sink, no signs of life. But there was something strange near the back, tacked up on the wall like a shrine. Photos. Old ones, yellowed, curling at the edges, some black and white, others Polaroids. All of people standing next to RVs. Every photo showed a different couple or family. Big smiles, dogs, camp chairs, happy, wholesome snapshots of road life. But every RV in those photos looked wrong, too old, too familiar. And in the bottom corner of every photo, written in shaky black marker, never checked out. I stepped back, hard. My heel caught the warped edge of the entry step, and I stumbled out into the dust, heart slamming in my chest. The door creaked behind me as it moved, slow and deliberate, then stopped. Not closed, not open, just watching. That's when I knew this place was sick. Not haunted, not cursed, sick. Like the land itself had turned inward on something dark and couldn't spit it out. I drove out without looking back. Gravel sprayed under my tires. I didn't stop for gas, didn't stop to eat. Drove straight for hours until I hit civilization. Some tiny town called Axtell with a single blinking stoplight and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since 1958. I sat there for what felt like forever, just breathing. Just watching the waitress pour coffee for the same 3 regulars who probably hadn't missed a Tuesday breakfast since Reagan. I asked her, casual as I could manage, if she'd ever heard of Jericho Pines. She didn't answer right away, just stared, still holding the coffee pot in midair like her brain was deciding whether or not to lie. "You don't go up that way anymore," she finally said. "No one does." "Why?" She looked down, poured the coffee, and didn't meet my eyes. Too many folks never came back. I pressed her, told her what I saw, about the light, the tapping, the pictures. She got quiet again, but the man sitting next to me at the counter, old-timer, face like leather and fingers yellowed from decades of cigarettes, he leaned in. "They say that place eats people," he said. "Not all at once. Slow. Makes them forget the rest of the world exists. Makes them feel comfortable, safe, like it wants you to stay." I scoffed. Reflex, really. But part of me wanted to believe him, because if I didn't, then I had to explain what happened myself. "You said they say, but what about you?" I asked him. He hesitated, took a long sip of coffee. "My brother," he said, "back in '92, took a solo trip, was supposed to check in by the weekend. All we found was his van parked by that dry creek bed. Still had gas, still had food, keys in the ignition, no sign of him. Did you look inside the RVs? They were empty," he said. "Except for one thing. There was a picture of him, smiling, standing next to his van like he'd never left." My skin crawl after I cut the trip short, drove straight back to Reno, parked the Westphalia and didn't touch it for months. I tried to bury it. Told myself I'd imagined most of it, but I knew better, because a few weeks after I got home, I started dreaming of that place. Same dream, over and over. I'd be standing in the middle of Jericho Pines, and everything was dead quiet. The trees twisted above me like smoke, the air too still, and the ground breathing beneath my feet. Then I'd hear it, the tapping, from inside the van. One night, I woke up drenched in sweat, heart racing, went outside to clear my head. That's when I saw it, a Polaroid photo taped to my RV door. My face. My van. That same dusty campsite. And in the corner, written in black marker, "Almost checked in." I didn't sleep that night. I sat outside with a flashlight in one hand and my old Smith & Wesson revolver in the other, watching the trees behind my shop in Reno like they might suddenly part and show me the way back to Jericho Pines, like the woods themselves would reach through the miles and finish what they'd started. The Polaroid sat on the workbench beside me, curling at the edges from dew and cold. My face stared back at me, flat and dumb and smiling, like I was proud to be there. But I wasn't proud. I wasn't smiling. I never took that photo. I kept telling myself this had to be some sick prank, some elaborate joke. Maybe someone had followed me from the park. Maybe they watched me, waited for the right moment to shake me. I wanted that explanation to be true. Hell, I needed it to be true. Because the alternative meant that Jericho Pines hadn't let me go, that it was still following me. Days passed, then weeks. The dreams got worse. Sometimes I'd wake up gasping for air, convinced the van was parked just outside the window. I could smell the dust, hear the door creak. I started seeing that light again. Not in the sky, not in my room, but in the reflection of glass. The kind of blue that flickers like an old tube TV in a dead channel, a memory trying to broadcast itself. I started avoiding my own van. I'd walk around it like it was a grave. Something about it felt off. I even considered selling it, but every time I thought about listing it, my stomach twisted up into knots. One morning, I found another photo, this time tucked under my windshield wiper. It was grainy, black and white. Looked like it had been shot decades ago. It showed a man in a wide-brimmed hat standing by a VW van nearly identical to mine. Desert behind him. Empty picnic table. Same crooked pine trees in the background. And on the table, a photo of me. I dropped it and didn't pick it up again. That same day, I drove straight to the county clerk's office. I needed to know more about Jericho Pines, who owned it, when it was built, why it had been left to rot. The clerk was helpful, if a little puzzled. She pulled up a file from the 70s. Sure enough, the land had been developed in 1974, managed by a small family-run company out of Ogden. Listed a Marvin and Darlene Kessler as the original founders. Campground opened with 25 pads, septic, and a central bathhouse. But here's where it got strange. There was no record of it ever being closed. No tax delinquency, no foreclosures, no out-of-business filing, just silence. The last recorded payment on the property was in 1996, then nothing. No sale, no deed transfer, no complaints either. It was as if it had just been forgotten. I pushed harder. Dug through old newspaper archives at the library, scanned every Utah travel guide I could find from the 80s and 90s. Still nothing. No ad placements. No photos. No campground reviews. Nothing beyond that same sun-bleached wooden sign and the gravel lot I remembered. It was like it had been erased or never really existed. But it had existed. I'd been there. And I wasn't the only one. I started asking around, quietly. Posted a few anonymous threads on survivalist forums, RV camping groups where didn't use the name Jericho Pines, just described it vaguely. Abandoned park, southern Utah, old sign, blue light. Most people ignored it. A few cracked jokes. But then, 2 weeks later, I got a private message from a user with the handle Murray.77. His message was short. I saw the light too, back in '01. Stayed one night. Still not right. I replied immediately, asked for details, coordinates, anything. He didn't write back right away. When he did, he sent a scanned journal page, handwritten, yellowed, looked like it had been torn from a leather-bound book. The entry was dated June 17, 2001. It described driving through Utah, looking for a last-minute place to park. Said the spot felt like it had been waiting for me. He mentioned the blue light, the silence, the tapping on the roof. Said he'd woken up to find a photo of himself stuck to the inside of his windshield. The entry ended with this line, "Whatever that place is, it doesn't keep people, it remembers them." That part stuck with me, because that's what it felt like. Like the park had a mind of its own, a memory. Not a haunting, not some random bad energy, but an intelligence. Cold, patient, focused. And I was in it now. On its list. No matter how far I drove, it had my scent. That's when I started keeping a journal of my own. I needed to record things, to anchor myself. I started with dates, weather, what I ate, then dreams, then sightings, lights, photos. I'd tape them to the pages, try to find patterns. Maybe it sounds crazy, maybe it is. But when you're haunted by something you can't touch, the only weapon you have is order. And then about 6 months later, something happened that cracked everything wide open. I was camped in New Mexico, way off grid, just west of the Gila National Forest. Clear skies, nothing around for miles. I'd finally started to feel okay again. Not safe, exactly, but quieter inside. Like maybe it had finally let me go. That night, I stepped out of the van to take a leak, stretched, took in the stars, and there it was, faint, flickering, a blue light out past the tree line. Too far to see clearly, but close enough to recognize. That sickly television blue blinking like a beacon from another dimension. I stared at it, heart rate spiked. Adrenaline dumped into my blood like a floodgate opened. Then I saw movement, a shape, human, standing just at the edge of the trees, watching. I called out, "Hello?" And my voice felt too loud, like it didn't belong in that moment. The figure didn't respond, just turned and walked back into the woods, slowly, like they knew I wouldn't follow. The light went out. I stood there for a long time, didn't chase it, didn't investigate, just stood there shivering until the sun cracked over the ridge, and when I got back inside the van, there it was, another photo, but this time it wasn't of me. It was a child, a boy, maybe 9 or 10, dirty blonde hair, scared eyes, standing beside my van in my chair. Same dusty pine trees in the background. No name, no date. Just that same handwriting in the corner. He remembers you too. I kept that photo in my glove box for 3 days before I could bring myself to look at it again. The boy's face haunted me, not just because of how afraid he looked, but because of something deeper, something I couldn't quite explain. He wasn't just scared, he was confused, like he'd just woken up from a bad dream and didn't know which part of the world was real anymore. And behind those eyes, there was something familiar. I swear to you, I had seen that face before, not in person, not recently, but buried deep in the folds of memory. I tore through old photo albums, camping magazines, even internet archives. Days passed, nothing. Then one night, I found it. A missing persons database from 1993. Kid named Jeremy Clanton vanished while on a road trip with his parents in Utah. Their RV had been found parked at an abandoned campground. Doors locked, food in the fridge, keys in the ignition. Empty. I pulled up the report. Location, Sevier County. Unincorporated land. Roughly 20 miles north of the old turnoff I'd taken into Jericho Pines. I couldn't breathe. This place didn't just remember, it preserved. That photo of the boy had been taken recently. Fresh color, modern lighting, clear print. That campground hadn't just taken him in '93. It had kept him. And now it was showing him to me, like a cat dropping a dead bird on your doorstep. Not out of malice, but to prove something. The next morning, I did something I promised myself I'd never do. I went back. I don't even remember the drive, just the feel of the wheel in my hands, the hum of the tires on asphalt, the strange calm that settled over me like a heavy blanket. I wasn't thinking. I was following something. By the time I reached the dirt road turnoff, the sun was just dipping below the ridgeline. Same wooden sign, still rotting, still leaning, still half covered in desert vines like the earth itself was trying to swallow it back down. Jericho Pines Campground. Established 1974. The letters looked older this time, more faded. The paint was peeling in places I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I had and just didn't want to believe it. I eased the van up the gravel road. Every tree was right where I remembered. Every lot marker, every silence. It was like the place hadn't aged a day since I left, like it had been waiting. I parked in the same spot, shut off the engine, waited. No wind, no birds, just that same thick, airless quiet. I stepped out, my boots crunched the gravel. I looked toward the abandoned RV where I'd first seen the blue light. The door was open again, wider this time, like an invitation. But I didn't go there. Instead, I walked toward the bathhouse at the edge of the lot, the one I'd avoided the first time. Its door was barely hanging on its hinges, and the inside was pitch black. I raised my flashlight, but the beam barely pierced the dark, like the shadows were swallowing it. Still, I went in. The smell hit me first. Damp, metallic, faintly sweet, like old rust and dead flowers. The floor was littered with leaves and broken tile. The stalls were empty, but the back wall of the shower room, that was new. It was covered in photos, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, taped, stapled, tacked to the peeling paint like a grotesque scrapbook, all ages, all eras, people standing by RVs, people eating s'mores, kids with fishing poles, couples kissing in lawn chairs, smiles, laughter, but none of the photos had dates, none had names, and every single person in them looked slightly off. Not scared, not dead, just vacant. Their eyes didn't focus, their bodies slouched in unnatural ways, like mannequins mimicking life, and written beneath them over and over in red marker, "We never left. We never left. We never left." I stumbled back. My foot caught the edge of a crack drain. I fell hard, the flashlight skittering across the floor, and then I heard it. That soft, slow tap, tap, tap coming from the walls. No rhythm, no echo, just close, nearby, like fingernails brushing against concrete from the other side. I scrambled up and ran out the door. Gasping, my lungs burned like the air had turned into smoke. I sprinted back to the van, yanked the door open, and froze. There was someone sitting in the passenger seat. The boy, Jeremy, same face as the photo, same clothes, but he wasn't scared anymore. He was just sad. His eyes were hollow, lips slightly parted like he wanted to speak but couldn't, and then he was gone, vanished. No sound, no movement, just an empty seat. I didn't think. I drove. I don't remember steering, don't remember the road. I only remember the sound of the gravel spitting behind me and the sickening weight in my chest, like something had climbed in and anchored itself to my ribs. By the time I hit pavement again, I was crying. Not from fear, but from a loss I couldn't name, and taped to my steering wheel. One last photo. Me standing next to that boy, Jeremy. Both of us smiling, same crooked trees behind us, same light in the sky, and this time, it didn't say anything in the corner. No date, no name, just a single black drawn across the bottom. Like a checklist, like I'd been claimed. After I left Jericho Pines the second time, something in me shifted. Not fear, not even dread. Something quieter, hollower. You ever hear silence so thick it feels like it has weight? Like it presses on you, lives in your bones? That's what followed me now. Not footsteps in the dark, not voices, just that unbearable, impossible silence. I stopped sleeping again. When I closed my eyes, I'd see that photo, me and the boy pinned beneath that black check mark. The final tick. The done deal. My hands would shake when I tried to eat. I started hearing things in the hum of the van's engine, like whispers built into the RPMs. Phrases I couldn't quite make out. Then the lights came back. First as flickers and reflections, chrome bumpers, the lenses of my binoculars, the mirrored panel on my stovetop. Then at night, drifting across my campsite like distant headlights. Always that same unnatural blue, cold and twitching like electricity trapped in fog. But it wasn't the light itself that broke me. It was what started to disappear. First, my photos. The old ones, the real ones. Family shots from the 80s. Trailhead snapshots. A picture of me and my dad holding up trout in Montana. Gone. Just empty film sleeves and static. Then names. I'd try to remember them. People I'd met, places I'd stayed, and they'd slip away like dreams. I'd reach for a memory and come back with ash. One night I sat by the fire and tried to say my mother's name out loud. And I couldn't. Just couldn't find it. Like someone had gone into the attic of my brain and turned the boxes upside down. That's when I understood. The park wasn't hunting me anymore. It was absorbing me, piece by piece, memory by memory, like water soaking into sand. Every camper who vanished from Jericho Pines, they weren't dragged away. They weren't buried in some shallow grave. They were still there, but not alive, not dead, just reduced, flattened into that place, like fingerprints on the walls. And now it was my turn. That photo, the last one with the check mark, wasn't a threat. It was a receipt. I had been cataloged, filed, and soon I wouldn't remember enough of myself to fight back. So I made a choice. One last drive. If I was going to disappear, I was going to do it on my terms, not fading in some half-life of phantom memories and blank photo albums. I had to go back, to burn it down, or bury myself in it, one or the other. I stocked the van with fuel cans, bottled water, flashlights, fire starter, drove all night through wind-whipped desert, the moon watching like a blind eye. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just drove with the static on the radio and the weight of my own erasure growing heavier by the mile. I hit the gravel road just before sunrise. The sky was bruised purple, the clouds dragging like torn sails. I parked in the same cursed lot one final time, killed the engine, stepped out, and I knew this time I wouldn't leave. Not unless I beat it. The bathhouse door was already open. The photos were gone. Not a single scrap left. Just bare, crumbling walls and water stains that looked like faces if you stared too long. I poured fuel over the floor, up the walls, into the drain, then to the old RVs, the picnic tables, the wood posts. I didn't light it yet because I saw something. By the tree line, maybe 50 yards out, a shape, a woman, long black hair, barefoot. She stepped forward, no sound. I raised the match and shouted, "Back off, I'll do it!" She didn't stop. And as she came into focus, I saw her face. It was mine, a woman with my face, but older, eyes empty, skin slack, mouth hanging slightly open like she was trying to breathe underwater. She raised one arm, and in her hand, dangling from her fingers, was a Polaroid. I stepped closer. My breath caught. The photo was me, crouched by the fire, in this exact moment, holding a match. Only behind me, in the photo, the entire forest was already on fire. I spun around. The matchbox slipped from my hand, because it was true. Flames, everywhere. Not where I'd poured fuel, but further back, in the woods, in the trees themselves, burning blue, cold, unnatural, like fire from the wrong universe. The woman, my double, stepped forward again, reached for me, and then she said it, mouth barely moving. "He remembers you." My knees buckled. The ground rushed up. I saw stars behind my eyelids. Static. And then silence. When I woke, I was back in my van, parked on a hill I didn't recognize. No fire, no smell of smoke. Just open desert and a black sky full of stars. The only sound was the click of the Polaroid ejecting from my dash. I reached for it, hands trembling. It was blank. Just white. And in the corner, written in red ink, "Don't come back." That was 2 years ago. I haven't. I still live in the van, still travel, still try to hold on to what's left of me. Some days are better than others. I can still remember my dad's voice, my first dog's name, but there are gaps. Big ones. Whole chapters of my life missing. Sometimes I wake up in places I don't recognize with no memory of how I got there. Sometimes I smell burnt pine and old film and I freeze, like the world is about to tilt sideways again. But I'm still here, and I think that matters. Because maybe that place doesn't want to kill you. Maybe it doesn't even hate you. Maybe Jericho Pines just collects souls, memories, smiles and photos, people who don't run fast enough. And once you've seen it, once it's seen you, you never really leave. So if you're out on the road and you see an old wooden sign half buried in dirt, if the campground's too quiet, too clean, too forgotten, if you hear a tap on your roof at night and see a soft blue flicker out your window, don't take a photo. Don't stay for one night. Don't even look back. Just keep driving and hope it hasn't already remembered you. I didn't go to Alaska to find danger. I went to disappear. It was late August when I crossed the border, my 24-foot Class C creaking under the weight of every item I thought I might need to survive the loneliness I craved. The lower 48 had become too loud, too full of people and noise and expectations. I was done. Done with the phone calls I didn't return. Done with the job that pretended to care. Done with the routine that numbed me. I needed the silence, the kind that lives in the pines and stretches for miles in every direction. Alaska was where I would find that, or so I thought. My name's Connor. I'm 37, single, and I'd been full-timing it in my RV for just under a year before I made my way up the Alcan Highway. Most folks I met on the road would say they dreamed of Alaska, the wildness, the freedom, the sheer space. Me, I didn't dream about it. I needed it. I wanted to test myself, maybe even punish myself. What better way than to camp alone in some of the most remote land left in America? I rolled into the Wrangell-St. Elias region after a week-long drive through a blur of evergreens and forgotten towns. I'd heard about a small, unofficial pull-off near a river. No hookups, no signage, just a flat stretch where a few locals sometimes parked for hunting season. I had no idea what made me pick that spot. Maybe it was the way the water glinted like steel, or how the trees looked like they hadn't seen a human in years. But the moment I parked and shut off the engine, I knew something felt different. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, like a blanket thrown over my ears. Not even birdsong. No wind. Just the soft ticking of the RV engine cooling and my own heartbeat pounding louder than I wanted it to. I should have left right then. But when you come looking for isolation, you tell yourself silence is the goal. You romanticize it, even when your gut starts whispering otherwise. I told myself I was being dramatic. I set up camp, popped the windows for airflow, and made myself a cup of instant coffee that tasted like rust. The sun hung heavy and low, as it tends to do in late summer up here, casting everything in that golden haze that makes you think nothing bad could possibly happen. Around 7 p.m., I stepped outside with a folding chair and sat near the edge of the tree line, watching the river. That's when I noticed it. A set of prints in the damp earth, large, deep. At first, I thought bare, and maybe they were. But they were spaced strangely, more deliberate, less like wandering, more like stalking. I scanned the woods but saw nothing. Just trees. Old trees, leaning and creaking as if whispering secrets to one another. I stood up and walked the perimeter of the clearing. No other tire tracks, no human footprints but mine. The idea that someone or something had been watching me unsettled me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. But still, I stayed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, not yet, but from a nervous energy that prickled just beneath the skin. I lay there in my bunk, wrapped in a flannel blanket, the windows open just enough to hear the river's rush. Then I started hearing something else, something I couldn't place. It started soft, a tapping like fingernails on the outside of the RV. Not scratching, just deliberate. Tap, pause, then again, tap, tap. I sat up, heart rate doubling. I leaned toward the window and froze. Nothing. No shape, no movement. I told myself it could have been a tree branch or an animal brushing past, but the taps had been too evenly spaced, too intentional. By 3 a.m., I'd convinced myself it was just my mind playing games. That's what solitude does to people, right? It messes with your sense of reality. I eventually drifted off. The next morning, I stepped out to the kind of cold that burns your lungs. Frost clung to the grass. But it wasn't the cold that woke me fully. It was the tracks. They circled my RV. Twice. Large, human-sized prints. But barefoot. No tread. Just toes. Toes and heels. In freezing mud. I stared for a long time, my breath fogging in front of me. I didn't move. I didn't even reach for my phone. I just stood there, staring, trying to tell myself there was a logical explanation. But there wasn't. Not out here. Not this far from civilization. I spent the day pretending nothing was wrong. Chopping firewood I didn't need, reorganizing my food bins, playing music too loud just to fill the silence. Every few minutes, I'd glance toward the tree line, half expecting someone to be standing there. But there never was. Just that oppressive stillness. That night, I locked every window, every door. I even placed a can of bear spray next to the bed. I wanted to believe that would make me feel safe. It didn't. At 1:12 a.m., I woke to the sound of breathing. Not mine, not from inside the RV, but right outside the window. Heavy, wet. Like something too large for a man, but too controlled to be an animal. The kind of breathing that's aware of you, that mimics your stillness. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Just stared at the ceiling, praying it would go away. It didn't. Then came the knock. Just once. Sharp. Hollow. Like knuckles on fiberglass. Then silence. I don't know how long I lay there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. I never looked at the clock again. I didn't sleep. I just waited for sunrise like it was salvation. When light finally came, I got out. I had to. I stepped out of the RV like a man stepping into a dream he wanted to wake up from. There were no footprints this time, not a single one. But I knew what I'd heard. I knew what I'd felt. That presence, it wasn't in my head. And somehow the lack of evidence made it worse, like whatever had been watching me had decided to clean up after itself. I thought about packing up that morning, driving back to Glen Allen, maybe further. But pride is a funny thing, and fear, real fear, makes you question your sanity. I told myself I'd give it one more night, just one. I had my bear spray, my hunting knife, my rational mind. What could happen? But Alaska doesn't care about your reasons. I spent that entire day watching the woods. I didn't move much, didn't cook, didn't write in my journal like I usually did. I just sat in my folding chair next to the RV, hands on my knees, bear spray holstered to my hip, eyes scanning the tree line for any flicker of motion. But the thing about watching the forest is it watches back. Every sway of a branch, every twitch of a shadow. After a while, it starts to feel like the trees themselves are breathing. A few ravens circled overhead in the late afternoon, their calls harsh and ragged, like something dying far away. I used to think ravens were just birds, but up here they carry a different weight, like they know something you don't. By 6:30, the sky began to darken, and I felt the temperature drop sharply. The Alaskan dusk has a way of sneaking up on you. You look up and suddenly the lights changed, gone cold and blue and brittle. It was like the land was warning me. Still, I didn't leave. I cooked a can of chili and ate it cold. I didn't want to run the stove, didn't want the smell drifting. I'd already convinced myself someone, might be close enough to catch it. As night fell, I checked the locks 3 times, closed the curtains, then sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The breathing didn't come that night, the knock didn't either. But something worse did. At 3:42 a.m., I was woken not by a sound, but by a change in sound. The river, it had gone silent. At first, I thought I'd just dreamed the noise, but I sat up and listened harder. Nothing. No rushing water, no wind, no birds, just the hum of the RV's fridge and my own pulse thudding in my ears. The river hadn't stopped, obviously, but the sound of it had, like something was absorbing it, swallowing it whole. Then I heard movement on the roof, one soft footfall, then another. I held my breath. A third. It was slow, measured, not like an animal scrambling. This was deliberate. I eased my hand toward the bear spray. Every inch of my body screamed to move, to yell, to do something, but I was paralyzed. All I could do was listen. The steps crossed from the back vent toward the cab, then stopped. Total stillness. I forced myself to crawl toward the front seat and reach for the driver's door. I paused, hand trembling just inches from the handle. Then I heard it. A whisper, right above me, like a breath pressed against metal. I don't know what it said. I don't know if it even was words, but something was spoken. Low, wet, like someone trying to remember how to use their mouth. And then it was gone. No footsteps leaving, no jump, just gone. I waited until morning to get out, waited until the sunlight turned the frost on the windshield into diamonds. When I climbed up onto the roof, there was nothing. No tracks, no marks, just dew. But I knew what I'd heard. The river had returned to its normal sound too, but it didn't feel right anymore. It was louder now, almost mocking. I left that spot within an hour. Didn't even make coffee, I just drove. South, toward Valdez. I told myself I'd stay at an RV park, plug in, be around people again, shake the feeling. But I never made it that far. I pulled off at another turnout around midday. A maintained campground this time, still remote, but with fire rings and signs. There was a family maybe 2 sites over. I could hear the faint buzz of a generator, kids laughing. It felt safer. I parked, leveled, sat out with a paperback I didn't read, and tried to pretend like everything was normal. That night, I slept better. There's comfort in proximity, even if it's just the distant hum of other humans nearby. My body started to relax, the adrenaline fading. Maybe it really had just been my mind. But Alaska doesn't let you forget, not when it's chosen to show you something. The next morning, I found something underneath my RV, a strip of leather. Not mine, not from any of my gear. About 8 inches long, frayed on both sides, looked chewed. At first, I assumed it had been dragged there by a dog or coyote, but when I picked it up, I felt something sharp embedded in it. A tooth, not a fang, a human molar. I dropped it, hard. It bounced off the gravel like a rock. I didn't tell anyone at the campground. What was I supposed to say? Hey, just found a chewed piece of hide with a human tooth under my rig. Anyone lose a jaw? I kept it to myself, left again. This time heading west. I didn't stop for 2 days. I just drove, windows down, music blaring, trying to drown out something I couldn't name. But the worst moment came in talk. I'd pulled into a station to fuel up, went inside to grab jerky and a coffee. The guy behind the counter was an older local, probably in his 60s. Weathered face, real calm. When I paid, he looked at me and said, "You camping up north?" I nodded, not thinking much of it. "Wrangell side?" "Yeah," I said. "A few nights." He gave this slow nod. "You see anything weird?" The question hit me like a slap. Not any bears? Not any moose? Weird. I hesitated. "Why do you ask?" He looked out the window, jaw clenched, then leaned in just slightly. "Sometimes they watch folks from the trees. Sometimes they come real close. They don't always leave marks." "They?" He didn't answer, just bagged my items and said, "You take care out there." I drove out of talk with my stomach in knots. That night, I parked at a rest area near the border. It was busy enough, a couple truckers, a camper van from Quebec. I figured I'd finally get a good night's rest. But sleep didn't come. Because I realized something that chilled me more than anything I'd heard or seen. I hadn't checked the undercarriage of my RV since that morning. I grabbed my flashlight, crawled underneath. My fingers trembled on the gravel, and there, taped to the rear axle, was a strip of birch bark. Written on it, in charred black markings, were 4 crude symbols I didn't recognize, but I felt what they meant. A warning or a claim. Either way, I knew then I wasn't being followed, I was being carried. I left Alaska the next morning. Didn't even brush my teeth. I just drove. Didn't look back, didn't stop for breakfast, didn't stop to dump my tanks or refill propane. I just pointed the nose of my RV south and pressed the pedal like salvation waited at the next state line. But you don't leave something like that behind. You carry it. I crossed back into the Yukon by noon. The border officer glanced at my passport, smiled politely, then waved me through. And for a second, just one heartbeat, I felt relief. The air felt lighter, the trees less tall, the silence not so suffocating. But even as the miles passed, that weight stayed with me. In the rear view, I swore I saw something. Not someone, something. Not chasing, not hunting, just watching. And I started noticing little things, subtle things. Like the smell inside the RV changed. It wasn't bad, not rot or decay, just different, like moss after rain, mixed with ash. I cleaned every surface, washed all my clothes. Still, the scent lingered. Worse were the dreams. Every night after I left talk, I started waking up gasping. Not from nightmares I could remember, just a feeling. Like something had been in the RV with me, watching me sleep. Close. So close I could hear it breathing even after I opened my eyes. One night, I woke with my hand on the floor. I never sleep like that. I keep my arms tucked in, always have. But this night, my palm was pressed against the laminate floor, like I'd been reaching for something, and something had been holding it. I felt it as I pulled my hand back, the cold, the pressure, the resistance, like fingers letting go. I didn't scream, I didn't jump. I just sat there in the dark, rocking back and forth, whispering to myself like a child who just realized the monster in the closet was real all along. I finally reached Haines Junction by the end of the week. I parked in a full hookup site, surrounded by other RVers, kids running around, someone cooking bacon a few sites down. It should have felt safe, but I couldn't shake it. That thing on my axle, the birch bark, I'd thrown it away back near Beaver Creek, tore it up, tossed it into the woods, but the symbols still burned behind my eyes. I'd started drawing them without realizing it, on napkins, in the margins of my journal. One time on the condensation of the window, like my hand had a memory that didn't belong to me. I tried to talk to someone. An old man in a Class A next to mine had been to Alaska 5 times. I asked if he'd ever seen anything strange up there. He gave me this long look, like I'd asked the wrong question to the wrong person. Strange? He said. You mean bears in the outhouse, or you mean strange? I didn't answer. Just looked at him. He nodded, took a deep breath. There's stuff in those woods that don't care if you believe in them, and if they do notice you. He looked toward the trees that rimmed the campground. Sometimes they follow. Why? I asked. He shrugged. Why do we poke ants or catch fireflies? Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe they're just bored. That night, I locked every door and window again. But it didn't matter, because it came inside. I didn't see it, didn't hear it, but I knew. I woke up at exactly 3:03 a.m. and everything was wrong. The air was heavy, not just cold, oppressive, like breathing through wet wool. The light from my phone flickered even though the battery was full. My dog, a black lab mix I adopted a few months earlier, was growling low from under the bed. She never growled, never even barked. And then the scent came back. Moss, ash, and something burned. Not wood, not food. Teeth, like someone had been cooking teeth. I sat up, frozen. And that's when I heard the whisper again. But this time it wasn't outside. It was behind the bathroom door. Not loud, not aggressive, just soft, repeating. A wet, dragging syllable I couldn't place, like someone trying to remember a name they'd only heard in a dream. I grabbed my flashlight, turned it on, and it immediately flickered, then died. Even the backup lantern I kept in the drawer wouldn't light. I was trapped in that RV with whatever was whispering my name through the door. Then the knob started to turn. Slowly. I didn't wait to see what came out. I grabbed my keys, snatched the dog by the collar, and flung the main door open so hard it bounced back on its hinges. I ran barefoot into the gravel lot, into the night, not even caring who saw me. A couple in an Airstream 2 rigs over opened their window and shouted. I couldn't speak, couldn't explain. Just stood there in my boxers, shaking, holding my dog like a shield against whatever had decided I was worth noticing. When I went back inside, it was gone. No scent, no sound, nothing. But the bathroom door was wide open, and drawn into the condensation on the mirror were the same 4 symbols from the birch bark. Perfectly copied, perfectly still. I left the campground at dawn, didn't pack, didn't say goodbye. I drove until my eyes ached and my hands cramped around the wheel. I didn't stop until I reached the border at Whitehorse, and even then, I didn't sleep. I just parked next to a hotel and sat there for hours, watching the shadow under my RV door like it might stretch into something else. When I finally checked into a room, I didn't go back out to the rig for a full day. I locked the door, let my dog curl up next to me on the bed. I tried to convince myself it was over, that whatever I'd brought with me, whatever had noticed me up in those woods, had stayed behind. But that's not how these things work. You don't get to choose what follows you. 2 days later, back on the road, I noticed the first bird, a raven perched on a road sign near Haynes Road, staring dead at me as I passed. I told myself it was coincidence, just a bird. Alaska has thousands of them. But the next day there was another, closer this time, then 2, then 5. They began circling overhead, not like scavengers, but sentries, like they were charting my path. I kept driving, back through British Columbia into Washington, Oregon, Idaho. I slept in Walmart parking lots, private RV parks, anywhere with people and light. But the nights got stranger, lights flickering, clock resetting itself to 3:03, my dog waking up growling at corners that held no form, just an absence. A pocket of cold that clung to the walls, and always, the scent. Moss, ash, burned enamel. I started looking up those symbols, spent hours online, forums, subreddits, anthropology sites, even deep dives into obscure First Nations mythology. Most led nowhere. Some hinted at shadow folklore, stories not written down, only whispered across generations. There was one account, a thread buried 10 pages deep on a vanished forum. A user named CW Black 49 wrote about a solo trip into Wrangell St. Elias in 1996. He described the same symbols, the same dreams, the same raven sentries. He said something old lived in those woods, not spirit, not animal, not man. Something that watched from behind the trees, that chose its target based on something invisible, not belief, but attention. That once you noticed it, once it noticed you back, it didn't need to chase you. It just followed, because it already had what it wanted. He ended the thread with a sentence that still haunts me. It doesn't live in Alaska. Alaska is just the mouth it speaks through. That's when I knew it wasn't the land that cursed me. It was the attention. That one night camped beside the river, I'd seen it. Or worse, I'd felt it see me. And ever since, I've been its story to tell. I finally returned home, back to Colorado. Familiar ground, people, safety, or the illusion of it. I parked the RV behind a friend's barn, covered it, told him I'd sold it, let the lie live. I moved into a condo, tried to get back to normal life. But you can't rebuild a foundation if the rot is still in your bones. The symbols started showing up again, on my window, in fog, on receipts I hadn't touched. I stopped drawing them, but my hand would find them anyway. On my thigh while I watched TV, on the shower glass, even once traced into the frost of my car windshield before I even got in. I stopped sleeping. My dog, once calm, playful, unshakable, wouldn't go near the bathroom after dark, wouldn't bark, just stare. I started showering at the gym, started keeping lights on all night. Then came the knock, not on the door, but on the mirror. 3 soft taps, like someone pressing from the inside of the glass. That night, I walked outside in nothing but socks and a hoodie and drove to the edge of the national forest. I left the RV key on a tree stump, walked 5 miles into the trees, sat in a clearing, closed my eyes, and I begged, not in words, just in surrender. I told it, I know you're there. I know you see me. I know I saw you. Please, let that be enough. I don't know if it worked. I still see ravens. Still wake up sometimes at 3:03, but it's quieter now, like something watching me from the hill has finally blinked. I don't RV alone anymore. I tell people it's because I got tired of the lifestyle. Say I prefer short trips now. But that's a lie. The truth is this. Some places weren't meant to be seen alone. Some silences were never meant to be heard. And some stories, if you hear them just right, will hear you back. So if you're heading up to Alaska, chasing that purest kind of wild. If you find yourself pulled to a stretch of river without a name, where the trees grow just a little too straight and the wind carries too many voices, pay attention, but not too much, because attention is permission. And once it knows you're listening, it will never stop whispering.